Today, when you hear the word piracy, you think of unauthorised use of copyrighted material. In this case, detectives were looking for pirates in the bays around Brisbane. It was a curious start to an investigation, and one that would go deeper than the waters in which it began.
Around about 3 o'clock in the morning, the SU rescue boat got called out to an unknown medical emergency on board a boat somewhere in the bay. And it was pitch black. We're just shining spotlights everywhere trying to find this boat that was supposed to be in distress. It took us about half an hour before we actually located it. The boat was in total darkness. There was no navigation lights whatsoever on the boat. Then the lights caught a lady standing on the back of the boat.
Hello, are you okay over there?
The skipper called out to her and asked if she had a medical emergency on board. She replied yes.
Hey, sweetie, what's been happening?
I jumped over onto the Misty Blue and I asked her what had happened. She said someone must have boarded the boat and I must have been hit very hard and got knocked out from it.
What's your name, darling?
Trisha Byers.
When I went down the steps into the cabin, I saw a man lying on the left-hand side on the bunk. There was quite a bit of blood around. The patient was fully conscious. I asked him what happened, and he said to me that someone had boarded the boat. He heard the female call out, and that's when he got a start, and he jumped up, and that's when he must have hit his head.
Yeah, Vic, we've located Misty Blue. We have 2 injured persons on board, and we're about to take the vessel in tow. We'll be back at our base in approximately 15 minutes.
The man and his partner were immediately taken to hospital, where the local police attended.
On our arrival, we saw John Asquith and Patricia Byers. John was being treated by medical staff for a head injury. Both of them looked tired, but they were relatively calm in their dealings with us and at a little bit at a loss as to what has actually happened to them. While John was being treated, we tried to ascertain what happened during the evening. Patricia had stated that they'd been travelling out on Moreton Bay earlier the previous afternoon when the boat broke down with a fuel filter problem. She decided that they'd anchor up in the channel and stay there the night.
Oh, yeah.
They had a romantic evening, they had dinner, they drank 2 bottles of wine, half a bottle of port. They both showered out on the back of the vessel in the nude and went to bed.
Wake up.
The next thing she can recall is laying there naked, curled across the front of the boat.
What's wrong?
John with blood over his face, bending over asking if she was all right. They both then retired to the inside of the boat, at which time John has begun an hour and a half of calling for help over the radio.
But it appeared John's wound was not a result of a bump to the head, but something more sinister.
The doctor, he told me from his experience of treating injuries that it appeared to be a bullet wound. And we looked at John and at Patricia Byers, and they all but laughed off the idea as to how ridiculous is that. One would think that if a person was shot in the head, that you would know about it.
When X-rays were carried out, metal fragments to a depth of 7 centimetres were found in John's skull. He had been shot, and detectives were brought in to find out who shot him and why.
We then went to the PA hospital to speak with John and also to speak with Patricia in relation to what happened. We couldn't find Patricia, she wasn't at the hospital. So it was imperative for us at that time to find her.
There was two scenarios. People had either got on the boat and assaulted her and shot John, or there had only been the two of them on the boat. Somebody must have had a firearm on that boat. Now, whether it was Patricia or John or other people, that's what we were trying to establish.
Police were looking for Patricia Byers, the only witness they had to what may have occurred on the Misty Blue. She wasn't at the hospital, where an X-ray had just confirmed her partner had been shot. Nor was she at home.
Once we got to the house, there was no one there, and in the meantime, we'd been contacted by the hospital that Patricia had turned up to see John. We spoke with Patricia, asked her what had happened. She told us a story that pirates had come on board and attacked John. She told us that he'd been shot in the head, or the pirates had shot him in the head.
However, Patricia Byers had never mentioned this when she first spoke to the police. Her lack of such an important detail was an immediate concern.
She was asked, was there any firearms on the boat? And she said no. She was then asked, did she have any firearms? And she replied yes, that she had 2 firearms at home, and there was also one at the business.
And we asked her if she'd be prepared to come back to her house, let us search the house for firearms. She took us through the house, basically, and showed us where the air rifle was. She then gave us a .22 rifle which had a scope on it.
She was quite helpful and didn't appear to be worried in any way about the consequences of taking her weapons from her. She used to operate a fishing trawler, and she used to use the firearms to shoot sharks, and also she had some pet parrots on their property, and cats used to come and attack the parrots, and she used to shoot at cats.
She also took them to the business that she and John operated, where another weapon, a 10-gauge shotgun, was confiscated.
After collecting the firearms with Patricia, we asked her, was she prepared to come back to the police station to be interviewed on audio and video? She said no, but she would talk to us off tape. We asked her, was she prepared to undergo a test on her hands to establish whether she had fired a firearm recently or to eliminate her. This was purely voluntary for her, and she was not compelled to undergo that test in any way, and she declined to undergo that test.
She also said that she just wanted to get back and see John at the hospital, so we then took her back.
Meanwhile, the Misty Blue had become a crime scene.
We've gone inside the cabin of the boat. The left-hand side, the port side, was where John had been laying. We noticed in the V section between the 2 bunks, there was a quantity of dried blood in the floor well. And on the right-hand side, the starboard side, there was the blood splash pattern and also splashed up on the cushion. And on the examination of the dried blood, we found small fragments of metal consistent with that of a splatter from a bullet, as well as on the wall of the bulkhead, which we took possession of for forensic examination.
When these fragments, along with those from John's skull, were examined microscopically, they were found to be gilded.
Because they had gilding material adhering to them, this would indicate that it's most likely a .22 caliber weapon which has fired this projectile. That firearm was recovered by detectives and brought to police for further examination. However, in this case, the pieces of projectile were damaged to such a great extent that there was no markings on them which could be used to match it back to an individual firearm.
So Patricia's .22 caliber rifle with a telescopic lens could not be ruled in or ruled out. And at this stage, neither could her story about pirates.
Well, I don't know of any pirates in Moreton Bay. It could have been a valid story. We had to confirm or deny her story. There was nothing missing from the boat. Radios were on board, all the fishing gear, the barbecue, that was all on board. Even John's wallet was still on board. There was nothing taken whatsoever. And then if you're talking about pirates, they would be going on board to take something. So the only options that could have happened on the boat were that John had tried to shoot himself, although very unlikely, because where the bullet was in the top of his head, there was no physical way that a person could hold a long rifle back and shoot themselves in the head. Another option that we did have, which was that Patricia was the one that shot him. The only other option is that it could have been a domestic fight on the boat and things had gone bad. And subsequently John had been shot in the head somehow.
Once John was sufficiently recovered to be interviewed, we went to the hospital and spoke to him.
We made a decision to take the weapons up to John to make sure that they were the guns that were in the house.
He identified the shotgun and said that that was the one from the shop. He identified the air rifle and said that was the one from home. However, with the .22 rifle, he said he had never seen that before. We asked him why was he so positive he had not seen this .22 caliber rifle before, and he said it was quite simple. The one that they had at home didn't have a telescopic sight. So immediately that raised a suspicion in our mind. We suggested to John that maybe Patricia had shot him. He was totally aghast at that suggestion and said that no way in the world, that could never have happened. As far as he was concerned, they had a very good relationship and there was no problems whatsoever. He was of the opinion that somebody must have come on the boat and had assaulted both him and Patricia.
John Asquith had most probably been shot by a .22 caliber weapon. Police had ruled out pirates and an attempted suicide. Suspicion was now with his partner, Patricia. One of the guns she had presented to police was a .22 caliber rifle. But it wasn't the caliber that had caused the concern, but the fact that John had not recognised the weapon.
We did a check of that weapon and found that it had been purchased at a gun shop in Beenleigh the same day, or that afternoon, when John Asquith had been taken to the PA hospital. I then went down to the Beenleigh gun shop. He showed us his records and the documents said that the gun had been purchased by Patricia. She'd paid $100 or something for the weapon. The owner did say that she said she wanted a .22 without a scope. The only one he had at the time was the weapon that we had, which had a scope. He did say to her that the scope could be taken off.
And he remembered that she also had to go to an automatic teller to get some money to pay for it.
From there, we took out a search warrant to get bank details from Patricia. She'd gone to the ATM, which is straight across the road from the gun shop, got the money out, walked across and purchased the gun. We could definitely say that yes, she had bought that gun from that shop that afternoon. We knew then that's why she wasn't at the hospital to see John, because she was out buying a gun. Because she knew, obviously, that we would do a search on the house and would be asking for the weapons. So we were then looking for the fourth gun, the old .22.
The blood-smeared half-cabin runabout was towed to Manly for a thorough police examination. The 53-year-old victim, John Asquith of Yatala, had been shot at point-blank range. A 46-year-old woman had also been on board. It's understood the pair had been drinking for some hours.
The boat was supposedly broken down and moored in the channel.
Water police are now questioning boaties who were in the area at the time of the shooting. This afternoon, police divers began a search of the area where the boat was moored. It's believed they're looking for a .22 caliber rifle.
Our immediate thought was maybe the rifle was discarded over the side of the boat in Moreton Bay.
However, with the tide and the currents and the movements of the ocean, nothing was able to be located.
If Patricia Byers was responsible for shooting her partner John, then they needed to find a motive. First stop was their relationship.
All family and friends said that they had a good relationship together. They got on well, there wasn't any problems, they were in business together. They seemed like a happy couple.
Everyone we had spoken to had said that it was a good relationship. There was no fighting, they'd never fought. They were going along the lines that they would probably eventually get married. To me, that had to raise a few doubts as to what had happened. But you go back to the evidence, and the evidence was there. Patricia had some sort of involvement in shooting John.
The second stop was John's financial situation and who would benefit if he died.
John had said that he had one insurance policy, and he said that at that time beneficiaries were his children. When we got the details of the insurance policy, the beneficiary had been amended, and Patricia was the sole beneficiary of that insurance policy. So we then did a check on a registry of life insurance policies, and they came back and said that there was another 4 insurance policies on John's life.
Mr. Asper?
Yes. We then took the whole lot of the documents up to John, showed him each individual document.
These two?
He pointed out that it wasn't his signature on any of those documents.
None of them.
We asked him, did he have any idea who may have done it? He said no. We asked him, would Patricia have done it? And he stated, no, there's no way in the world she would not have done that. The beneficiary for all 5 policies, totalling the amount of $275,000, was Patricia Byers.
It appeared Patricia Byers had stood to gain financially if John had died on the night he was shot. But in order to build a case against her, the detectives would firstly need to prove the documents were indeed forgeries.
In most cases, when a person commits the act of forgery, they try to reproduce what we call a pictorial representation of the genuine signature. When we compare the specimen signatures of John Asquith with the disputed insurance applications in his name, the first thing we see is there is some attempt at reproducing the pictorial likeness, those loops and whirls. But what they failed to do is to pay attention to the finite things that make up John Asquith's signature. That is, the fluency, the speed of writing, the complex formation of that particular signature, and the pressure of the pen onto the paper. All the disputed John Asquith signatures fall down in all those areas. They were not written by John Asquith, and I was satisfied that all those simulated forgeries had been written or forged by the one writer.
And police believed that person was Patricia Byers. Not only were all the life insurance documents sent to the one mailbox address owned by her, but when detectives looked at the records at a medical centre where a checkup was required for one of the life insurance policies, the evidence kept building.
There was no booking at all for John Asquith. The only booking that was in there was for a Joan Asquith. She had a blood test taken and was given a certificate. And their carbon copy in their receipt book was also made out to a Joan Asquith.
It didn't take an expert to see that the documents sent to the insurance company had been altered.
So we compiled a photo board with a photo of Patricia, showed this to the receptionist, and the receptionist identified Patricia as the person who went to the surgery on that day.
While the detectives mounted a case of attempted murder, John Asquith continued to deny Patricia's involvement. That was about to change.
He'd gone to his own doctor, said he was feeling sick. The doctor did a urine test, and they found that he had a large quantity of Valium in his system.
The circumstantial evidence against Patricia Byers was mounting, but police still hadn't been able to find the missing .22 caliber rifle they believed she used to shoot her partner.
My son Ashley was fishing
and he noticed a rifle butt or a stock of a rifle. It's an unusual thing to find by the river, of course. And we heard about the shooting on the boat. We read about it in the paper the next day, and we saw it on the TV, on the news. Putting two and two together, perhaps it might have something to do with it. So we decided to hand it in to the police.
The finding of the butt was significant. It was the sawn down part of a .22 caliber rifle. But it was the fact that those who found it lived right next door to Patricia Byers that made it such an incredible find.
Well, I thought if the rifle stock was found there, and if she had sawn the gun down, that she may have thrown the barrel part in the back of the creek as well. I then made arrangements with our police divers, hopefully to try and find the barrel. I wasn't holding any high hopes.
They were only in the water 40 minutes and one of the divers recovered a barrel of a .22 caliber rifle.
I thought, fantastic, that was it. That's what we needed. The only other missing link to that part was the actual gun part itself.
The barrel was examined and seemed to have been cut. If that same damage was present on the piece of barrel retained on the rifle, this may have damaged or broken up the projectile or caused it to start to deform as it's left the barrel, or it may break up as it strikes an object such as the skull of Mr. Asquith.
I really think that that's the only thing that saved his life, was the fact that it shattered before it hit him in the head. Realistically, if she'd cut the gun down with a hacksaw and done a straight cut, I don't think John would be here today. So I thought maybe she'd cut the thing down at the house. So I then took a search warrant out.
When we got to the residence, there was a large work shed and a vice on the bench in the work shed. The area was quite clean. However, underneath the vice, there was what appeared to be wood shavings.
Those shavings, along with the Winchester rifle butt, were taken to a timber specialist to see if the two were a match.
Starting with the rifle butt piece, we made a razor cut on the end grain of the wood piece and determined whether it was a hardwood species or a softwood, and it turned out to be a hardwood. Then we loaded into a microtome, which is a sliding knife. And the knife allows us to cut very thin sections along the 3 planes that we need. We've stained that with safranin, and that highlights all the wood structure. And we can place it onto a glass slide to enable us to look at the wood anatomy under the microscope. It's a bit like fingerprinting in a way. All species have a different arrangement of the anatomical features. So we're able to look under the microscope and then key those features into a computer database, and that'll give us the possible timber types. In this case, the wood turned out to be Betula species, which is a birch. It's a northern hemisphere hardwood.
When the wood shavings were then compared, the result was what the police had hoped.
We determined conclusively that the shavings were Betula or birch, the same timber type and timber species as the rifle butt.
I think she cut the gun down at the home at Yatala and put it on the boat, had it there. She'd planned to go out that weekend. It was all going to happen on that weekend. And the only thing that went wrong was that John didn't die. He just stayed alive, and I think that wrecked her whole plan.
She was then charged with 1 attempted murder, grievous bodily harm with intent, unlawful wounding, and 11 counts of forgery and 11 counts of uttering a false document.
With all the evidence presented to him, John Asquith still couldn't believe that the woman he loved had tried to kill him. But 2 months after she had been arrested and was out on bail awaiting her trial, John changed his mind.
He felt really sick one day after Patricia had prepared him some lunch. And he said that he felt really drowsy and was bumping into things and couldn't stay awake.
He said he'd gone to his own doctor, said he was feeling sick. The doctor did a urine test and they found that he had a large quantity of Valium in his system.
He said that he was not on any medication and hadn't taken any medication since he left hospital. So she must have done it. She must have put something in his food. This realisation that John came to was like a bombshell to him. He just completely changed his attitude, and he realised that Patricia, the woman he had been living with and, in his opinion, had an absolutely wonderful relationship with, had been trying to kill him.
However, as police were about to discover, John was not the only man to have fallen under Patricia Byers' spell. After a 2-week trial, a jury found Patricia Byers guilty of attempted murder. She was sentenced to 12 years, but was eligible for parole after 3. It was thought she would not reoffend. But for one family who had taken a keen interest in her case, the opposite was more likely to be true.
I received a phone call from a woman, a bit concerned in relation to her father, who had lived with Patricia Byers for a long period of time. And because of what she'd seen in the media, and she then had fears for her father, because all the assets, the house, the cars, the boat, were all now in her possession.
I don't believe you're doing this to me.
Patricia Byers and Carl Gottschens had been a couple for 8 years, until, as his daughters learned, he had apparently walked out on Patricia on the 6th of July, 1990.
And they told us that when they hadn't heard from their father, they had phoned Patricia, and Patricia had told them that they had split up and that he was going to Thailand to be with his Thai girlfriend. She appeared quite emotional about this, was crying and teary, and appeared to be very upset about the breakup.
Everything's been taken care of? Sure. You go away, boys, okay? Oh, thanks very much.
According to his boss, Carl Gottschens was intending to see his Thai girlfriend and then return to work after 2 months. His boss had last seen him 3 days before his scheduled flight out of the country.
He asked me if I'd like to have a beer, and I was aware that things were probably a bit uncomfortable on the social scene, and I said, no, mate, I don't really want to walk into any domestics.
That's a real snake, yeah, thanks, mate. See ya.
They had sat in the car for a little while because Carl had been overpaid $1,000 in his wages, and they came to an arrangement that Carl would pay him back over a period of time or deduct it from his next pay.
It wasn't a big issue because he was a man of honesty and integrity. I shook his hand, wished him well, and said I'd see him in a couple of months when he came back from his leave.
He was quite surprised when, approximately 2 weeks later, he received a typewritten letter from Carl.
It was a resignation letter stating that he would not be coming back and that he had settled with Trish about his house, and in some ways he felt he may have made a bad decision, but he said he didn't believe Trish would be left on the shelf because she was a good-looking girl.
But there was no mention of the $1,000 Carl owed his employer. So his boss wrote back to him at the address Carl had requested all mail to go. His old place, now owned by Patricia. 3 months later, he received a cheque for the amount.
At that point, I figured, well, all monies had been paid, Carl had made up his mind, we'd send his gear off, and that was the end of the matter.
Our first step in trying to locate Mr. Gottschens was to try and confirm whether he had actually flown to Thailand on the date nominated. However, he never caught the plane.
I contacted Thai Airways and I was told that the flight had been cancelled by a woman purporting to be Mrs. Gotchins. She cancelled the flight and requested a refund.
All our attempts to locate him were to no avail.
The only hint that Carl was alive and well in Australia was the activity on his bank account and the purchase of a pergola for Patricia's place some 4 months after he had last been seen.
So if he had signed that, he was obviously still in Australia and still had some contact with Patricia. Or alternatively, somebody had access to his American Express card and had forged his signature on the voucher for payment for the pergola.
So I sent the letter of resignation from Carl and another letter with the ship logs, which had Carl's handwriting in it, to the document examination expert. The conclusion of the expert was that the signatures and the handwriting was not by Carl Gotchins. I also looked at what happened to Carl's assets, which included the house at Yatla, and found out that the house had been transferred to Patricia approximately 3 weeks after Carl had last been seen.
On the transfer document, the signature of Carl Gotchins and the signature of the witness were forgeries. The only genuine signature was that of Patricia Byers.
The American Express docket was also a forgery.
I went and interviewed the proprietors of the pergola company. The salesperson told me that he had attended at the address at Yatla, where he had met a woman that introduced herself as Tricia Gotchins, and signed the American Express voucher in front of him in the name of C.T. Gotchins.
Now, from a forensic point of view, this was absolutely brilliant evidence. We could then use the signature that Paddy Byers forged on the Amex transaction as a benchmark and compare that with all the other forged signatures that we had on all these documents and conclude that whoever signed the Amex voucher was the author of all the other forged signatures.
Police had circumstantial evidence, but they had no body, no crime scene, and no weapon. And their prime suspect was due out of jail in less than 18 months. Patricia Byers was the classic black widow. She had attempted to kill her partner, John Asquith, to obtain wealth. And now it appeared she had already had a practice run with her previous partner, Carl Gotchins. And while a body had still not been found, police and the prosecutor brought into the investigation knew they were looking at murder.
Months before, about a year before, she'd secretly obtained a copy of his will.
The signature that requested the will to be sent had been proved to be a forgery.
And she knew that she had to share that house, those assets, with the daughters. So she wasn't going to get everything. And she knew that Carl had started up a relationship with a new woman in Thailand. She knew that he was going to be leaving her. She knew that she was going to lose the house. She was going to be left with nothing. So the night that Carl walked through that front door, he disappeared off the face of the earth.
The next step was to ascertain if there was any forensic evidence at the house. By the time I did the search warrant, 6 years had passed since Carl had last been seen. And I found a diary relating to 1990. And on the 6th of July, there was an entry, Carl left, dropped him in the city.
And on that same day, a new bed was delivered.
The bed just seemed strange. Patricia had told John Asquith that Carl had left her and taken his bed with him, and it had a smell about it. I mean, if he was going to Bangkok, you wouldn't take your bed with you. If you were going to Darwin to then go up to Asia, it just didn't make sense.
I was asked to focus on the main bedroom area, particularly to search for the presence of blood. We found a series of very small droplets on one of the walls. These ranged between a half a millimetre to 1 millimetre in size, and there was about 21 of these droplets. We performed presumptive screening testing of the stains for the presence of blood, and they all came up positive. We performed a luminol examination on the carpet of the room. This is another presumptive screening test for the presence of blood. The carpet was basically placed on top of the gyprock. There was no underlay underneath, which made it unusual in the fact that it was there in that sort of state. And what we obtained was a whole area of positive reactions on the timber chipboard floor under the carpet. Once we turned the lights back on and had a look at to see where these fluorescent reactions were occurring, there seemed to be areas of dark staining that married up with where the fluorescence was occurring.
A DNA profile was created from the bloodstains and compared to the DNA from Carl Gotchen's daughters. While it couldn't be confirmed, the blood in the room was consistent with coming from the father of those daughters. The pattern of the blood spatter was also of great interest.
Due to their size, it can infer that they were deposited as a result of a strong force being applied to a source of blood. Something such as blunt force trauma, or it could be from a gunshot wound. Gunshot wounds typically cause what's called high velocity blood splash, and that type of staining is very small, almost mist-like blood stains. These were very small, so it certainly couldn't be eliminated. Or it could be something as mundane as sneezing or coughing with blood in your mouth or nose.
The bedroom had all the hallmarks of being the likely place of where Carl Gotchen's was actually killed. Couldn't say it was certainty, but it certainly looked like it. Obviously, the case would be significantly strengthened if we could find the body of Carl Gotchen's. So how did she get rid of the body? There were, at least to my mind, two options. She buried him nearby to where she killed him, which would mean that she buried his body somewhere in the yard, or alternatively, she took him out on a boat and dumped his body at sea.
When John Asquith commenced his relationship with Patricia, the house at Yatala was still in the process of being finished. So I interviewed him about when different things had happened to try and identify if something had occurred where a body could be concealed around the time that Carl went missing. From everything he told me, a likely place was the garden shed that he thought had been constructed about the time Carl disappeared. The shed was dismantled and the area below was excavated by the backhoe. I had hoped that we would find Carl's remains, but there was nothing found.
We had no body, no weapon, no definitive crime scene. But what we did have was substantial evidence that Patricia Byers had gone to great lengths to plan and conceal the death of Carl Gotchen's. Each individual piece of evidence could not prove her guilt, but when it was put together, I knew you could put a very compelling case of murder to the jury.
Patricia Byers has pleaded not guilty to murdering her de facto husband. Carl Gotchen's went missing in July 1990. Byers claiming he'd run off to Bangkok to marry his prostitute girlfriend. Prosecutor Paul Rutledge claimed all Mr. Gotchen's worldly assets, worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, have disappeared through a series of frauds and forgeries directly linked with Byers.
Byers' motive to kill Carl Gotchen's: money. She knew that to get that money, those assets, there was only one way: forgery. But for forgery to work, Carl had to die.
After a month of hearing the evidence, a jury came back with a guilty verdict.
The verdict was welcomed by John Asquith, who fell prey to the Black Widow in 1993.
Naturally enough, I'm pleased to see justice done.
Until now, the jury was unaware that Byers was already serving 12 years in jail for that attempted murder. As a result of this verdict, Byers' future is life in prison.
Patricia Byers has the right to apply for parole in 2012. As a result of the 2 cases and her 2 convictions, rumours arose about the death of her first husband. Police investigated the car accident in which he died, but found no evidence to support the theory of foul play.
Nevada, 1994. A stretch of highway outside a nowhere town, the kind of place people only know from exit signs and gas receipts. It's just past midnight. Wind scrapes over the desert, drags dust across faded white lines. Headlights slice through the darkness, then vanish. Hours later, a dull orange glow rises on the horizon like a second sunrise that no one asked for. By the time the first deputy arrives, the fire has done its work. A car is nothing more than a blackened shell on the side of the road, metal twisted, glass melted, tires charred down to wire. The air still smells of gasoline and hot metal. But there's something wrong. This isn't just a car fire. This is where the story begins. This is the spot where someone disappears. The badge walks slow around the wreckage, flashlight beams shaking over the scorched interior. No body, no driver slumped over the wheel, no bones, no teeth, no melted belt buckle. Just ash, smoke, and a wristwatch fused to the seat frame, hands frozen at 12:41 a.m. The deputy radios in a phrase that will echo for decades. Vehicle totaled, no sign of the occupant. In the desert silence, that statement hangs heavier than the smoke. A burned-out car with no driver is not an accident, it's a question. By sunrise, the car has a name, registered to a 23-year-old woman from Reno. Journalism major, freelance reporter, part-time casino cocktail waitress. Her name is Emily Carter. She doesn't show up for her shift. She doesn't answer her phone. She doesn't come home. Her roommate thinks she stayed over with her boyfriend. Her boyfriend thinks she fell asleep at home. By noon, both of them are standing in front of a detective, hearing the words no one expects on an ordinary Tuesday. We found her car, but not her. The town hears about it before lunch. The burned car, the empty road, the missing girl. Radio stations push it between country songs and commercials for tire shops. Mysterious disappearance outside Reno, the announcer says, voice cool, detached. On TV, a local anchor leans toward the camera, eyebrow arched. A 1994 cold case in the making? Neighbors lock their doors. Parents tell kids not to hitchhike. Truckers turn down their radios as they pass mile marker 117, glancing at the shoulder where the guardrail is still blackened. Detectives move fast at first. They interview the boyfriend, the roommate, the co-workers at the casino. They collect the burnt fragments, bag and tag every piece of metal that looks like it once belonged to a life. Among the melted plastic and charred fabric, they find something that doesn't belong to the car at all, a small metal key, almost untouched by the fire, tucked near the back seat where the flames burned hottest. It doesn't match the ignition. It doesn't fit her apartment. It unlocks nothing they can find. But it's there, silent, gleaming in the evidence tray like a promise. Emily's last known movements become the scaffold of the investigation, and outline the detectives fill with speculation and fear. She clocked out of the casino at 11:32 p.m. Security cameras show her leaving through the staff entrance, coat over her arm, bag on her shoulder, eyes tired but focused. She pauses outside, talking to someone just off camera. The frame shows her shoulders turned, her hand gesturing, a brief laugh, then she walks out of view. That figure, that unknown shape hovering just beyond the lens, becomes one of the many ghosts in this story. They check the cameras in the parking garage. Her car leaves at 11:46 p.m., taillights flaring as she turns out toward the freeway, alone. No one else in the passenger seat, no one visible in the back. After that, the trail breaks. No traffic cams, no gas station receipts, no witnesses who remember her at the late-night diner. On the highway, the desert swallows everything. The next time her car is seen, it's on fire. The official version starts to form. Maybe she lost control, maybe there was a mechanical fault, maybe she hit something, panicked, got out, wandered off into the desert, maybe. But patrols sweep the sand in widening circles, boots crunching over gravel, search dogs panting under the sun. They find tracks from the first responders. They find coyote prints, jackrabbit hops, the swirling patterns of the wind. They do not find Emily. No shoe, no jacket, no trace of blood. A person does not simply vanish. Yet here, on this strip of Nevada asphalt, that's exactly what seems to have happened. The community reacts the way communities always do, under the heat of fear. They turn on the lights and look for monsters in the dark. Call-in shows talk about serial killers on I-80. Someone mentions a trucker who creeps on waitresses. A former co-worker swears she heard Emily talking about a big story the week before she vanished, something about the casino, about money that didn't quite add up. A bartender says she thought Emily looked nervous lately, eyes darting, always checking who was around. A friend from college remembers a phone call, late at night. If this pans out, it's going to blow up a lot of lives. The quote makes its way into the paper, printed in bold above a black and white photo of Emily smiling under harsh newsroom lights. Investigators dig into her notes. Spiral notebooks stacked on her desk, cassette tapes labeled in crooked handwriting, folders of photocopied ledgers and receipts. She was chasing something, a pattern of cash payouts that didn't match the reported winnings. A quiet network of shell companies routing funds out of the casino and into offshore accounts. Names appear in her scribbles, then vanish behind thick black marker where someone has redacted them for the cameras. Ongoing investigation, the sheriff says when reporters ask. We can't comment on active leads. Weeks turn into months. The search tapers off. The scorch mark on the guardrail fades beneath another coat of white paint. Emily's parents stop giving interviews. The missing posters curl at the edges, colors bleaching out under the sun until her face is just a vague outline, eyes ghosted, smile washed away. The file on the detective's desk thickens, then stops growing. What started as breaking news becomes a brief mention on anniversary segments. Nevada's unsolved 1994 desert mystery. It doesn't end, it just cools. The case slides from urgent to pending to cold. The word itself has a certain weight. It means leads that go nowhere, tips that dry up, evidence that sits in storage boxes stacked like tombstones on steel shelves. It means the phone doesn't ring anymore. It means the missing girl becomes a story parents tell their children when they're tempted to drive too late, walk home alone, trust the wrong stranger. The highway, the burned car, the empty road, it all becomes part of local folklore. They call it the vanishing at mile 117. But in the background, the questions never stop. A former detective retires with the case still on his conscience. A rookie cop who was on scene that night can't forget the watch, the frozen hands at 12:41, the way the fire seemed too aggressive for a simple engine blaze. A dispatcher remembers a strange call that came in around that time, never traced, a man's voice whispering, "It's done," before hanging up. Maybe it's misremembered, maybe it's nothing, but maybe not. Years pass. The calendar turns. New crimes push old ones off the front page. Technology changes. What counted as cutting-edge forensics in 1994 is primitive now. Someone in the state crime lab starts combing through cold case evidence, pulling dusty boxes from storage, checking if anything can be retested, rerun, reimagined under modern machines. When they crack open Emily's file, they find the watch, the metal key, a set of partial prints lifted from the underside of her car's door handle. Back then, the smudged swirls were useless. Today, they might be gold. The watch is interesting, but it's the key that draws attention. That weird survivor of the fire. Under magnification, they see tiny scratches along the shank, numbers etched so faintly they were missed before. Not a house number, not a P.O. box, a code. They run the prints again, feed them into databases that didn't exist in 1994. They run the code by property records, storage unit registries, restricted facility logs. One hit falls into place with a soft electronic chime that no one heard back when the case was new. The key matches a storage unit on the outskirts of Reno, rented under an alias in the winter of 1994. Rental paid in cash for 6 months. Then nothing. Detectives drive out there, past faded billboards and rusted chain-link fences. The storage facility manager, a man with sun-baked skin and a habit of squinting at everything, checks his yellowed ledgers. That unit hasn't been opened in years, he says. The rent stopped decades ago. Nobody ever came to claim it. Policy says after a certain amount of time they auction things off, but this one slipped through the cracks. The lock is still original, still waiting, still sealed. They cut it open. Inside, dust, darkness, and the smell of old cardboard. Stacks of boxes, a metal filing cabinet, a single folding chair. On the floor, a ring of cigarette burns where someone once sat for long hours, thinking, waiting, watching the door. In the cabinet, they find what no one expects to see after so much time. Paper, records, photocopied casino ledgers, payout sheets, internal memos, names, dates, figures that match the notes found in Emily's apartment. Someone backed up everything she was digging into. Someone kept it off-site, and someone never came back to destroy it. There's more. In one of the boxes, they find a microcassette recorder with a tape still inside. When they press play, the past unspools in hiss and static. A female voice, steady but tense. "This is Emily Carter. If you're hearing this, something went wrong." The room goes silent. The detectives lean in. She names departments inside the casino. She refers to the men upstairs, to off-the-books payouts, to hidden partnerships with people she identifies only by initials. She mentions a meeting, a late-night drive, a promise of finally getting the truth on record. The timestamp on the tape places it less than 2 hours before her car burned. The discovery hits the department like a dropped bomb. The sheriff holds a press conference. Under the glare of TV lights, he uses the words the public has been waiting to hear for over 2 decades. Significant new evidence. Breakthrough. Long cold case heating up. The headline writes itself. Nevada 1994 cold case solved. After 20 years, storage unit secrets emerge. The community that has lived with this wound suddenly has hope. Maybe there will finally be a name. Maybe there will be handcuffs, a trial, a face to blame for the sleepless nights. Behind closed doors, the tone is very different. The files from the storage unit reveal a network of fraud and skimming that stretches far beyond one casino. Shell corporations linked to real estate deals, political campaigns, private security firms. The initials in Emily's notes begin to look like real people with real power. Some of them are dead now, some aren't. Some appear in old photographs smiling at ribbon cuttings and charity galas, shaking hands with officials who are still in office. Detectives chase the leads, but doors close before they reach the hinges. Agencies promise cooperation, then send nothing. Requests for records get lost. A former accountant who might have talked dies in what the report calls a single vehicle accident. An ex-manager refuses to answer questions, citing failing health and faded memory, his lawyer doing most of the speaking. It becomes clear very quickly that someone, somewhere, prefers this story to end quietly. Inside the department, there's pressure. Solve the case, wrap it up, give the public closure. One of the detectives suggests a theory that fits just enough of the facts. Emily met with a low-level player in the scheme. Things went sideways. He panicked, attacked her, dumped her body somewhere far from the road, torched the car to erase the scene. The storage unit belonged to him. He started getting paranoid, stopped paying the rent, vanished. He's dead now, or gone, or living under another name. Conveniently unreachable. Conveniently unable to argue with whatever narrative is crafted around him. It's neat, it's clean, it's something they can call an answer. But there are problems. The partial prints on the car don't match the man they try to pin it on. The timeline is fuzzy. The microcassette cuts off mid-sentence with a sound that might be a knock on a door, or a hand covering the mic, or the click of someone stopping the tape. They can't prove who had the key. They can't prove who rented the unit without the original ID. And they can't prove what exactly happened on that stretch of road after 12:41 a.m. when the hands on the watch stopped moving. Still, the case file swells with memos, summaries, and cautious recommendations. Somewhere up the chain, someone signs off. The status in the system changes from open to cleared. Officially, the narrative is this. Emily's death, while her remains were never recovered, is attributable to foul play by an identified but deceased suspect linked to financial crimes at the casino. The cold case, according to the paperwork, is now solved. The press release is careful. It talks about closure, about the importance of persistence, about how modern tools gave them the answers they didn't have in 1994. It does not mention the names in the files. It does not mention the missing prints, the unanswered questions, the suspiciously convenient gaps. The headline that goes out is blunt, bright, and easy to swallow. Nevada 1994 cold case solved. Evidence in hidden storage unit ends decades of mystery. On screen, a younger photo of Emily fades in over footage of the desert highway. There is somber music, a solemn anchor, a neat package of grief tied off with a bow. In living rooms across the state, people nod. Some feel relief, some feel cheated. Emily's parents stand in front of the cameras one last time, eyes hollow, voices tired. They say they are grateful. They say they can finally let go. But when the microphones are off, when the reporters pack up, when the lights dim, they are left with the same brutal fact they have lived with since 1994. There is still no grave, no body, no place to go and say goodbye. They have been given a name to hate, a ghost suspect they will never see, and told to call it justice. The highway doesn't care. At night, trucks still thunder past mile marker 117. The guardrail is smooth and unblemished now, repainted, restored. The spot where the car burned is just another patch of shoulder, another piece of forgettable asphalt. But every so often, a driver who knows the story glances sideways into the dark and feels the hairs on their arms stand up. They see for a split second the orange glow of flames that have long since died out, the outline of a woman who stepped out of her life and into a question that has never been fully answered. In the records room, the file sits on the shelf with a new label: Cleared Homicide 1994. A solved cold case, a success story on paper. Yet inside the folder, the contradictions remain. The untraced phone call, the unidentified figure on the casino security footage, the mismatched prints, the abrupt end of the tape. Evidence that points in more directions than any official summary can afford to admit. The detectives who worked the case know it. The rookie who became a veteran and then retired knows it. The clerk who changes the status in the database sees the word solved and feels a flicker of doubt. Because the truth is simple and cruel. A case can be closed without ever really being understood. A community can be told that the monster is gone without knowing what it looked like. A missing woman can be declared dead without leaving the faintest trace of where she lies. And a headline can scream, Nevada 1994 cold case solved, while the real story keeps whispering in the dark, in the gaps, in the silence between what we know and what we will never know. So the story doesn't end, it lingers. In barroom conversations where someone leans in and says, "You know they never found her, right?" In late-night radio shows that revisit cold cases and ask if justice was truly served. In the shifting desert sands that bury and reveal, as if the land itself is holding on to a secret it refuses to give up. Out there, somewhere beyond the edge of the headlights, the truth about what happened to Emily Carter is still waiting. Waiting in the dark, waiting in the heat. Waiting in the space between an official resolution and the echo of a question that never really went away. In the end, it isn't the press conference or the file label that keeps the case alive. It's a single person sitting alone at a desk years later, staring at a line on a report that doesn't quite make sense. Detective Ryan Hale was 10 years old when Emily Carter disappeared. Back then, it was just a scary story adults mentioned when they thought kids weren't listening. Years later, when he joins the department, the vanishing at mile 117 is a legend told in the break room, a shorthand for frustration and failure. By the time the case is declared cleared, he's busy chasing other nightmares, fresh bodies, fresh blood, crimes that won't wait for anyone's conscience. He doesn't think much about Emily beyond the headline, until the day her name shows up on his screen. It happens because of a glitch, the kind of minor software hiccup that usually just annoys people and gets it a phone call. The system pushes a batch of recently updated case files to his queue. Most are small, admin-level changes. Typos fixed, dates corrected. One of them is different, homicide, year 1994. Status, cleared. The internal tag reads, high profile, external interest, media. He clicks out of habit more than curiosity. And there she is, Emily Carter, 23, missing, presumed dead. Car burned, no remains, storage unit, microcassette. He doesn't mean to read the whole file, but one page leads to another, a witness statement here, a photo there. Grainy image of a burned vehicle, close-up of a wristwatch, hands locked at 12:41. A typed summary of the tape found in the storage unit, a note in the margin in faded pen. Tape ends abrupt, review audio anomaly, no follow-up on that note, no answer, just the question hanging there, preserved like a bug in amber. Hale leans back in his chair and feels it, that low hum of discomfort that good detectives learn to listen to. Something about the story doesn't sit right. If this was just a robbery gone wrong, if some low-level thug panicked and torched a car, why the storage unit full of records? Why the careful backups of financial crimes? Why a key that survives a fire and leads straight to a hidden archive? It feels less like panic and more like planning. Less like an accident, more like a message. He scrolls through the photos of the storage unit, cardboard boxes, metal filing cabinets, paper everywhere. He imagines someone standing in that cramped space, smoke curling from a cigarette, hands stained with ink and sweat, organizing documents that should have never seen daylight. Whoever rented that unit wasn't just running from the law, they were building an insurance policy, a weapon, or a grave marker. On paper, the case is closed. A suspect is named, an ex-employee with a history of gambling debt and shady associates, killed in an unsolved hit-and-run 3 years after Emily vanished. Convenient, clean. But when Hale pulls the man's file, he finds nothing tying him physically to the car, the key, or the tape. No hard link, just proximity and rumor. The kind of thing you can use if you want a story to end. He tells himself he's just curious, that's all. A young detective poking around an old mystery because it's more interesting than paperwork. But the next day he finds himself in the records room, asking the clerk to pull the physical file. There's a moment of recognition when the clerk hears the case number. "You're digging that one up?" she says, voice low. "Didn't they put it to bed?" Hale shrugs. "I just want to see how they tucked it in." The file is heavier in his hands than it looked on screen. Manila folders, Photos slid into plastic sleeves, transcripts bound with rusting clips. The tape isn't here. Audio evidence is stored separately, but there's a full-type transcription. He flips to it, eyes tracing the words that came out of a cheap microcassette in a forgotten storage room decades ago. "This is Emily Carter. If you're hearing this, something went wrong." He hears her voice in his head even without the recording, imagines it sharp and fast, the way journalists talk when they're trying to pin the world to the page before it wriggles away. The transcript is filled with references that were vague in 1994 and are clearer now with the benefit of time. References to elected friends of the casino, to law enforcement partners who helped smooth over inconvenient noise, to cash funneled through charities that exist only on paper. The tape isn't just about stolen money, it's about a system of protection. Near the bottom of the page, there's a line that's been underlined in blue ink by someone before him. "They think I'm just a girl with a notebook. They don't realize I've got copies off-site. If something happens, someone will find them." Hale glances at the photo of the storage unit again, at the boxes of neatly labeled files. Someone did find them, eventually, but whoever Emily thought was coming to her rescue that night never made it, or never tried. The transcript ends mid-sentence. "I know this road is empty at night, but I keep checking the rear view. I don't think I'm alone out." Nothing after that, just a single bracketed word from the transcriber. End. Hale reads the last line 3 times, feeling the same creeping chill each time. The room around him seems to tighten. He can imagine the scene too clearly. The desert road, the dark, the glow of taillights in her mirror, the sudden understanding that she is not alone, that whatever she thought she could expose might cost more than she expected. He removes the photo of the burned-out car from its sleeve and holds it up closer. Blackened metal, warped roof, no clear sign of an impact. The report says the fire started near the engine fed by accelerant. That alone is odd. How does accelerant end up on the outside of a car she's driving? Who brought it there? The notation is clinical, almost bored, likely deliberate ignition. Likely, but no one could say how or by whom. A solved case with the word likely anchoring its critical moment. Hale closes the file and signs it back out, logging it as temporary review. The clerk raises an eyebrow but says nothing. Cops are superstitious about cold cases. Some think reopening them invites bad luck. Some think it invites heat from people who would rather certain ghosts stay buried. He walks out of the records room feeling both. On his next day off, he drives the highway. Decades have passed, but the desert doesn't change much. The signs are newer, maybe. The billboards scream about injury lawyers and casinos instead of cigarette brands, but the land is the same. Flat, exposed, indifferent. He counts the mile markers. 114, 115, 116. At 117, he slows and pulls onto the shoulder. The trucks rush past, buffeting his car with bursts of hot wind. He steps out, boots crunching on gravel, and looks around. The guardrail is bright and unblemished, a clean silver line following the curve of the road. There's no trace of fire now, no scar on the asphalt. He walks a few yards down, scanning the dirt beyond the barrier. Scrub brush, scattered stones, a rusted beer can half buried in the sand. If Emily's body is out there somewhere, time has worked hard to erase it. The desert is good at swallowing things. He imagines the car burning here, flames licking the night, visible for miles. Imagines someone standing just beyond the flare of light, watching, making sure it burns long enough, hot enough, making sure the message lands. A car fire without a body is not just destruction, it's absence, weaponized. He thinks about that key. If the killer wanted to tie up loose ends, why let that key survive? Why not toss it into the blaze? Unless they didn't know it was there. Or didn't care, confident the connection would never be made. The fact that the storage unit was untouched for decades supports one idea. Whoever put the files there never got the chance to retrieve them. But it doesn't tell him whether that person was on Emily's side or cleaning up after her. He drives back into town with more questions than answers, but he can feel something shifting inside him. This is no longer just curiosity. It's something sharper. A sense that the word solved has been stamped over a wound that never truly healed. He goes back to the casino. On paper, it's not the same place. New owners, new branding, new carpet, new lighting, new slogans about family-friendly entertainment that clash with the clink of chips and the hollow stare of people chasing losses. But the bones of the building are the same. The loading dock is still where it was. The staff entrance still faces the side lot. He stands where Emily was last seen on camera, near the door where she turned to talk to someone just off frame. The security director gives him a polite but wary tour. "Old case, huh?" the man says, swiping his badge through one door after another. "That was before my time. We've upgraded all our systems since then." Hale nods, makes small talk, but his eyes are constantly measuring angles, distances, from the doorway to the parking lot, from the cameras to the blind spots. He can see how someone could wait just out of sight, close enough to talk but far enough to avoid the lens. Someone who knew exactly where the cameras were. He asks about employee records from the early 90s. The director laughs. You're kidding, right? We've changed hands twice since then. Most of those files are dust, if they exist. The laughter doesn't reach his eyes. When Hale presses, the man shrugs. Look, detective, I'll see what I can dig up for you, but don't get your hopes up. That's all ancient history. We run a tight ship now. Ancient history. For a moment, Hale sees Emily standing where he is, balancing her notebook on her forearm, scribbling as fast as she can. He wonders if she heard the same words back then. Let go. It's old news. Nobody cares. He wonders if she smiled that stubborn little smile he's seen in her yearbook photo and kept pushing anyway. Back at his desk, he starts pulling threads. Campaign donations from the mid-90s. Property purchases. Silent partners listed on old corporate filings. The same surnames appear again and again, like a watermark behind every page. Some of those names show up in Emily's notes, in between arrows and exclamation marks and half-formed theories. He follows the money forward instead of backward, tracing it from those shell companies into modern ventures, security firms, construction contracts, a consultancy that just happens to land multiple government deals. Every path leads to people who should have been very nervous when Emily started digging. He knows he's staring at something big enough to crack his career in half if he isn't careful. He also knows that walking away will cost him more than a job. It will cost him sleep. It will cost him the thin thread of faith that says his work matters. At night, he listens to the tape. He has to fight to get access to it. Audio records from that era aren't digitized yet, sitting instead in labeled cases in a back room that smells like plastic and dust. When he finally cues it up on an old player, the sound is worse than the transcript suggested. Hiss, crackle, the faint clatter of something shifting in Emily's car as she drives. But under all that noise is her voice. Bright and alive in a way the black and white photos never captured. She speaks fast, packing details into sentences like she knows time is short. She names dollar amounts. She describes private conversations she overheard in VIP rooms. She laughs once, bitterly, at the arrogance of men who thought no one would ever track their schemes. Then her tone changes. There's a pause, and when she speaks again, her words are smaller, closer to the mic. Okay, that's weird. Same car behind me since the turnoff. A beat. Maybe I'm being paranoid. If this tape ends and they find it, I guess they'll know I wasn't completely crazy. Hale leans closer. He can hear the engine, the wind through a cracked window, the faint, steady clack of the turn signal. They think I'm just a girl with a notebook. They don't realize I've got copies off-site. If something happens, someone will find them. Someone will ask why a 23-year-old turned up burned on the side of a highway after calling out the wrong names. A few seconds of silence follow, then a sharp intake of breath. Oh, okay, they're getting closer. I'm going to. The tape cuts out, not a slow fading, not a natural end. A hard stop, like someone hit a switch. Hale rewinds that last 5 seconds again and again, listening for anything else. A voice, a horn, the grind of tires, the roar of an approaching engine. There's something in the background, a low rumble that might be another vehicle or might just be the tape degrading with age. But there's one detail that pricks at him each time, the turn signal. At the very end, it clicks faster, the way it does when a bulb is out. An odd thing to notice in the moment you realize you're being followed. An odd thing to remember years later, but it sticks. He shuts off the player and sits in the dark, knowing exactly what he's done to himself. He's crossed the line from curious to committed. This isn't just a file anymore. It's a voice in his ear, a car on a dark road, a fire he can almost see. And somewhere between a burned-out vehicle, a silent storage unit, and a list of people who have built careers on money that should never have been theirs, someone is very invested in keeping that fire from being relit. He doesn't tell anyone at first. Not his partner, not his lieutenant, not the clerk who raised an eyebrow when he signed out the file. He carries the knowledge like a pocket knife, small, sharp, hidden. But secrets have weight, and this one starts pressing on him the moment he walks out of the building into the flat Nevada light. A solved cold case, a burned car, a missing body, a storage unit full of receipts and sins, a tape that ends like someone snapped the world in half. He goes home and tries to sleep. The air conditioner rattles, a siren wails somewhere in the distance. His ceiling fan ticks in an off-kilter rhythm. Every sound feels like a countdown. Every shadow looks like headlights coming up behind his car. He lies awake until dawn, then showers, dresses, and goes back to work like nothing's wrong. The first person he breaks is the one person he shouldn't, the retired detective who caught the case the night Emily vanished. Jack Monroe lives in a one-story house with yellowing siding and a lawn that gave up years ago. There's an old RV in the driveway that hasn't moved in a decade. Hale knocks on the door with the easy confidence of someone who expects it to open. It does, eventually. Monroe stands there in a faded t-shirt and sweatpants, white stubble on his jaw, eyes that are still sharp in a face that's grown soft. "You're early," the old man grumbles. "Whatever you're selling, I'm not buying." Hale holds up his badge, then the file. "I'm buying," he says. "Time, about a case you worked in '94. At first, Monroe does what old detectives do best. He deflects with jokes. '94? Kid, I can barely remember last week." But when Hale says the name, Emily Carter, something flickers behind his eyes. He steps back, waves Hale inside with a weary hand. The house smells like old coffee and older regrets. Stacks of newspapers line the walls. On the TV, a muted daytime talk show loops drama without sound. Hale sits at the edge of a chair while Monroe lowers himself into an armchair that looks like it's been molded to his shape over the years. "They still talking about her?" Monroe asks, gaze fixed on a point somewhere over Hale's shoulder. "Not really," Hale replies. "Not officially. According to the system, they're done talking about her. Case is cleared." Monroe lets out a sound that could be a laugh or a cough. "Cleared," he repeats. "That's one word for it. You don't agree?" The old detective doesn't answer right away. He reaches for a mug on the side table, finds it empty, sets it down again. His hand shakes a little. "You ever see a case that wouldn't die?" he says quietly. "You close the file, you make the calls, you shake the hands, and it still sits with you, like smoke in your clothes." Hale nods once. "Emily, is that for you?" Monroe exhales through his nose. "It's the way it happened," he says. "Or didn't happen. We had nothing for so long. No body, no clear suspect, just a burned car and a missing girl. Then, years later, it all lands on my desk. Storage unit, tape, nice neat suspect with a toe tag. Suddenly everyone wants it wrapped. You know how it is. New sheriff, new politics. Let's clear some old business, show the voters we get things done." "Did you believe the theory?" Hale presses. "About the ex-employee, the hit and run." Monroe stares at the blank TV screen. "I believed what I could put in writing," he says. "I believed there was enough to make people feel better. I didn't believe it like I believe the sky is blue." He looks at Hale finally. "You listened to the tape yet?" Hale nods. "Yeah." Monroe's jaw tightens. "They made a summary for the press," he says. "Sanitized it, cut out the ugly bits about who she named, what she suspected. But that raw tape, she sounded scared. You don't fake that. She knew something was coming. We just never pinned down who was bringing it." "What about the storage unit?" Hale asks. "The files, the key in the car. Did you ever find out who rented the unit?" Monroe's eyes drift to a stack of old case files in the corner, boxes labeled in his handwriting. "I had a name," he says. "Alias, but tied to a real ID, supposedly. Just enough to hang our hat on. Just enough to tell a story. Then a memo came down from upstairs saying that angle was sufficient for resolution." Exact words. "Sufficient for resolution." You know what that means in plain English? "We've decided this is good enough. Stop digging." The bitterness in his voice is centuries old. "Who sent the memo?" Hale asks. Monroe shakes his head. "Doesn't matter now," he says. "Most of them are gone. Retired, moved, dead, whatever. The machine that protected that casino back then, it's not the same faces anymore. But machines don't die. They just change parts." They sit in silence for a moment. Outside, a dog barks. A car engine revs and fades. "Why didn't you push back?" Hale finally asks, knowing it's an unfair question, knowing he'd hate to hear it from someone younger. Monroe doesn't flinch. "I did," he says. "I pushed as far as I could without losing my badge, my pension, my ability to do any good at all. You'll understand that line one day, if you stay in this job long enough. There's the truth, and there's the amount of truth the people who sign your checks are willing to let you touch. We'd already been told once to back off when she was alive. Don't burn bridges with the casino. Don't scare off tourists. The girl is probably just chasing ghosts." He rubs his face. "When she vanished, I realized the ghosts were real. By then it was too late." Hale feels the words land. "They told you to back off while she was investigating," he says. Monroe's laugh is dry. "Informally, of course," he says. "Couple of gentlemen from upstairs had coffee with me. They hinted that we shouldn't overreact to every young reporter with a theory. They were real interested in who she was talking to, though, who her sources might be. I told them what I tell you now." He leans forward, his eyes suddenly hard. "I didn't know. She didn't tell us. She trusted us enough to report threats, but not enough to hand over her story. Maybe she thought we were part of the problem. Maybe she was right." Hale remembers the tape. Emily's line about law enforcement partners smoothing things over. The doubt slides deeper under his skin. Why are you asking me all this? Monroe says. Officially, I mean. Is the case reopened? Not yet, Hale says. Then do yourself a favor, Monroe replies. Let it go. Can you? Hale asks. The old man looks away. No, he admits. But that's my curse, not yours. When Hale leaves, the sun is high and brutal. He sits in his car for a minute, engine off, listening to the tick of cooling metal. Monroe's words churn in his head, sufficient for resolution. Don't burn bridges. Machines that change parts, not purposes. On the dashboard, his phone buzzes. A new email notification. Subject line. Records request. Casino employment files 1990s. He opens it. The casino's HR department has responded faster than he expected. Detective Hale, per your inquiry, we regret to inform you that employment records prior to 1998 are unavailable due to a flood event in our former storage facility. Any surviving documents were irreparably damaged. We apologize for any inconvenience. Sincerely, Human Resources. He stares at the screen. A flood. In the desert. How poetic. He types a reply, then deletes it. No point arguing over email. Instead, he picks up the phone and calls the county clerk's office. If the casino's records flooded, maybe someone else's didn't. Payroll taxes, licensing paperwork, union membership rosters, the public paperwork that big companies never quite manage to drown. It's slow work, boring on the surface. Spreadsheets and scanned documents, the opposite of car chases and crime scenes. But this is where the real trails live. He finds names that match the alias on the storage unit, cross-references them with addresses, finds one that stands out, a small house purchased in cash in late 1993 by a man who supposedly worked as a mid-level casino manager. The deed shows a quiet street not far from the river. There's no hit on current utilities, no phone number, no active property tax being paid by an individual. The house was sold again, 10 years ago, to a corporation with a bland name and no website. He drives out anyway. The neighborhood is old but not yet collapsed. Narrow yards, chain-link fences, cars parked in driveways under sun-faded tarps. The house from the deed is a plain single story with new siding and a fresh coat of paint that doesn't quite hide the age underneath. A plastic tricycle sits on the front lawn, tipped over in the grass. A woman in her 30s answers the door, a kid clinging to her leg. She wasn't even alive when Emily disappeared. She bought the place from some company, she says, after they renovated it. No, she doesn't know who owned it before. No, she hasn't found anything interesting in the walls, just old nails and dust. Hale thanks her, leaves his card just in case, and walks back to his car feeling the strange vertigo of chasing ghosts through houses that now belong to people who have no idea they're living on a crime scene's afterimage. That night, as he parks outside his apartment, he notices a car he doesn't recognize across the street. Dark sedan, tinted windows, engine idling. Not moving, not leaving, just sitting. The hairs on the back of his neck stand up in a way that has nothing to do with imagination. He sits in his own car, keys still in the ignition, and watches. A minute, two. The sedan stays put. He can't see who's inside. No movement, no flicker of a cigarette, no glow of a phone screen, just the hum of an idling engine and the heavy sense that someone is measuring his front door. He makes a decision. Instead of going inside, he pulls back out, drives around the block, and comes up behind the sedan, close enough to read the plate. The driver finally reacts. The car pulls away smoothly, not fast enough to scream panic, but just quick enough to say, "We're done here." Hale commits the plate to memory and calls it in once he's back in his parking space. Stolen. Reported missing 2 days ago. Found now at the curb outside his building, shadowing his life. When he goes up to his apartment, there's a folded piece of paper pushed under his door. No envelope, no signature. Inside, written in neat block letters, is a single line. Some stories burn people. No threats, no names, just a warning as sharp as a knife blade. He sits at his kitchen table, note in front of him, hands flat. The refrigerator hums. A neighbor's TV leaks laughter through the wall. He can feel his heartbeat in his throat. Someone knows he's digging. Someone knows exactly which story he's decided to poke. They're not subtle, but they don't have to be. The message is simple. We're watching. We remember how to make cars burn. He considers his options. He can go to his lieutenant, show him the note, the stolen car, ask for backup. Maybe they'll take it seriously. Maybe they'll tell him to document it and move on. Maybe they'll tell him exactly what Monroe told him. Let it go. He can walk away. Take the warning for what it is. Shred the note, return the file, forget the voice on the tape. Instead, he takes out his phone and snaps a photo of the note. Then he puts the original inside the case file between the photocopy of the storage unit lease and the transcript of Emily's final words. Another piece of evidence in a story that refuses to lie flat. On the wall above his desk, he pins up a map of the city and the desert around it. He marks the casino, the storage facility, mile marker 117, the old house near the river. He stands back, pen in hand, and waits for a pattern to emerge. It doesn't, not yet. All he sees are separate points connected by rumors, fear, and money that flowed like water out of a building that pretends it's just about slots and shows. The next morning, he drives to visit the one place the department has firmly labeled done: Emily's parents. Their house is smaller than he imagined, tidy, faded, a garden in front that someone once loved, now overgrown. Her father answers the door slowly, leaning on a cane. Time has bowed him, carved lines into his face that look too deep for one lifetime. "Detective," he says when Hale introduces himself. There's a flicker of recognition in his eyes at the word. He's seen other detectives on this porch. He's heard other voices say they wanted to talk about his daughter. "I thought you people were finished with her." "We never should be," Hale says quietly. "Can I come in?" Inside, the house is a shrine that never calls itself one. Photos on every surface. Emily as a child with missing front teeth. Emily in a cap and gown. Emily holding a camera, mid-laugh, hair blown across her face by the wind. Her mother appears in the doorway to the kitchen, drying her hands on a towel. Her eyes land on Hale's badge, then on the file. "You found her?" she asks, hope punching the air out of the room. "No," Hale says, and the word feels like a confession. "I'm sorry. I'm looking at her case. I have questions. I won't pretend I have answers. Not yet." They sit at the table. Her mother pours coffee with hands that barely shake. Her father watches Hale like he's measuring his soul. "Why now?" he asks. "Because I read the file," Hale says, "and I listened to the tape, and I think the way it was closed didn't tell the whole story." The parents exchange a glance that carries 20 years of grief. "You're the first one to say that out loud in this house," her mother whispers. They talk for over an hour. About the last week before Emily vanished. About the strange phone calls, long silences, then hang-ups. About the time her tires were slashed in the apartment parking lot. About the anonymous note she received at work that said, in jagged letters, "Drop it or we drop you." "She brought it to the police," her father says. "You people. They told her it was probably some drunk who didn't like a story she wrote. They said they'd keep an eye out. That's what they said. Keep an eye out." "Did anyone ever show you the storage unit files? The tape?" Hale asks. Her mother shakes her head. "We heard about them on the news," she says. "They told us later that it proved someone killed her and that the man responsible was already dead. They told us to take comfort in that." Her mouth twists. "Comfort. Do you believe them?" Hale asks. Her father's answer is immediate. "No," he says. "My daughter was smart, careful. If she was scared enough to make a tape and lock away documents, she was scared of more than some low-level crook with gambling debts. She told us she was stepping on big toes. That's what she called them, big toes. She laughed when she said it, like she didn't want us to worry." He looks at Hale, eyes bright. "We've been told, for 20 years, that the people who might have wanted her gone are dead, retired, moved away, that no one like that still has power. You believe that, detective?" Hale thinks about the stolen car outside his apartment, the note under his door, the email about the flood. "No," he says. For the first time, he feels something shift in the room. Not relief, not hope, but a kind of alignment. These people have lived with a question mark for 2 decades. Now they see that question mark branded on his face, too. "We can't do much anymore," her mother says. "We're tired, we're old. We light a candle for her every year and hope that if there is any kind of justice in this world, it's bigger than the version we've seen." She reaches across the table, places a trembling hand over Hale's. "But if you're going to stir this up again," she says, "you should know they don't like being stirred." "I'm starting to get that impression," he replies. When he leaves, he feels the weight of their eyes on his back. He knows that, in some cruel way, just showing up has reopened their wound. He also knows that walking away now would be worse than never knocking on their door at all. Back in his car, he looks at his reflection in the rearview mirror. For a split second, the image overlays with something else. A young woman's face, lit by dashboard glow, eyes flicking up in fear as headlights fill her mirror from behind. He blinks and she's gone, but her voice remains. A ghost riding shotgun as he pulls away from the curb, heading back toward a city that thinks this story ended long ago, unaware that somewhere in its shadows, a cold case is beginning to heat up in ways no one, not even the people who lit the first match, ever planned for. The city looks different when you're carrying a ghost on your back. Streets you've driven 1,000 times feel sharper, more fragile, like the whole place is a set built around a story no one wants to tell. Hale drives past the casino again on his way back to the station, watching the neon pulse in the daylight like a heartbeat that doesn't know it's supposed to slow down. People walk in and out, laughing, smoking, chasing luck. None of them know that somewhere beneath the new carpet and LED screens there's a burn mark no renovation can cover. He parks in the lot behind the precinct and sits for a minute, engine ticking. The note in his case file feels like it's burning a hole through the leather. Some stories burn people. They didn't write his name. They didn't need to. The message isn't about who he is. It's about what he's touching. Inside, the bullpen hums with the usual noise. Ringing phones, clacking keyboards, the low murmur of detectives arguing over details that might keep someone alive or send someone away. Hale drops into his chair and opens his computer. For a few minutes, he forces himself to deal with mundane tasks, follow-up emails, scheduling interviews for other cases, clearing a backlog of minor reports. It's like rinsing his brain in lukewarm water, necessary, pointless. He doesn't mention Emily to his partner. Not yet. Not until he knows which way the wind inside the building is blowing. What he needs is leverage, something more than a bad feeling and a 30-year-old mystery, something that, if it gets ugly, will make it harder for anyone to bury what he's found. He starts with the prints. The partials from the underside of Emily's car door handle were run through older databases years ago. No match to the named suspect, no match to known felons at the time. They were logged as unattributed, likely contamination. The phrase irritates him. Evidence that doesn't fit the story is always contamination. He sends a request to the lab to pull the original lifts. The tech on the phone sighs when she sees the case number. "You guys opening a museum down there?" she says. "Half the stuff from the 90s is barely holding together." He keeps his tone light. "Humor me," he replies. "Let's see if any of that barely holding together wants to talk to us now." 2 hours later, he's walking through the lab's cold fluorescent corridors, the air thick with the smell of chemicals and stale coffee. Angela Park, senior latent print tech, meets him at the evidence locker with a box in gloved hands. "I had to dig," she says, handing it over. "Whoever filed this originally had handwriting like a doctor trying to write a ransom note." She gestures to a viewing station. "Let's see what your ghost has to say." Under magnification, the partials from the car door come into focus. Half moons and swirls, broken lines that would have been laughed out of a textbook. But modern enhancement software fills in gaps the old machines never could. Hale watches as the chaotic smudges sharpen, edges defined, ridges reconstructed like a puzzle snapped back together. "We got lucky," Angela murmurs. "Whoever touched that handle had damp fingers. Sweat helps, gives us more to work with." "Please tell me you can run them fresh," Hale says. "Oh, I can run them," she replies. Question is whether the machine wants to give us presents today. She feeds the enhanced prints into the system. The matching software purrs to life, lines of code spilling across the screen. They stand there in the humming quiet, listening to the soft churn of the database engine crawling through millions of stored fingerprints, old and new, criminal and civilian. Angela breaks the silence first. "So why this one?" she asks. "We've got 100 cold cases you could be trying to resurrect. What makes this burned car so special?" He thinks about the tape, the note under his door, Emily's parents, their hope brittle like old glass. "It's supposed to be solved," he says. "I've seen solved. This doesn't look like it." She snorts softly. "Solved is a political term," she says. "Science prefers consistent with the evidence. We don't stamp that one on press releases, though." The machine beeps. A result pops up on the screen. Not a full match, too much missing for that, but a high confidence hit. The same finger, the same ridge flow, enough points to raise more than eyebrows. Name, Jonathan K. Marsh, age 57. Occupation on file, licensed private security contractor. No felony record, prints on file from state licensing requirements, not arrests. Employer, Apex Protective Services. Hale feels the air in the room shift. He knows that name. He saw it 2 nights ago while following paper trails. Apex Protective Services, a security firm with contracts all over town, stadiums, hospitals, high-end gated communities, and, according to an old corporate filing he dug up, a long-standing service agreement with the casino stretching back to the late 90s. "Whoever this guy is," Angela says, watching his face, "he just moved from nobody to somebody you should talk to." Hale nods slowly. "Prints were taken when?" he asks. Angela taps a few keys. "Licensing application, 2003, she says. "Renewed every few years. He's local, or was." He thanks her, signs the necessary forms, and walks out with a copy of the match report in his hand. The paper feels heavier than it should. Someone who touched Emily's car, someone who was close enough to leave sweat on her door handle, is now in charge of protecting half the city's assets, including, for a very long time, the same casino she was investigating. On his way back up, his phone buzzes. It's his lieutenant. "Hale," the voice says. "I've got a flag here from the lab. You requesting work on a cleared case?" Here we go, he thinks. "Yes, sir," he replies evenly. "The Carter case. 94 homicide, mile 117. I'm doing a review." "A review," the lieutenant repeats. There's no anger yet, just a careful blankness. "On whose authority?" "Mine," Hale says. "I found inconsistencies in the file, evidence that wasn't fully explored with the tools we have now. I thought it justified a second look." That he can almost hear the calculations happening on the other end of the line. "You know how this looks," his lieutenant says. "We have procedures. You want a case reopened, you bring it up the chain. You don't start poking it with a stick and only tell me after the lab sends me a courtesy ping." "You're right," Hale says. "I should have looped you in sooner. That's on me. But the fact remains." "The fact," the lieutenant cuts in, "is that I now have people upstairs asking why one of my detectives is stirring up a case they were very happy to stamp closed on. You see the problem?" There it is. Upstairs. Hale looks through the glass into the bullpen, sees his colleagues moving around, unaware that a rope is being tugged over all their heads. "I do," he says, "but I also see a fingerprint match tying the car to a man who's never been looked at, a man in charge of a security firm with long-term connections to the casino at the center of the original investigation." There's a pause, a longer one this time. "Bring what you have to my office," his lieutenant says finally. "Now. And for God's sake, don't talk to anyone else about this until we've had that conversation." Hale hangs up and gathers his papers. The note, the print match, a copy of the tape transcript. He leaves the original file locked in his drawer. If someone wants to make it disappear, they'll have to come through him. His lieutenant's office is small, cluttered, and too warm. On the wall behind the desk are plaques and commendations, a few framed news clippings about big busts from years past. The man himself, Lieutenant Davis, is in shirt sleeves, tie loose, a look on his face like he's trying to figure out whether Hale is a problem or a solution. "Sit," Davis says, nodding at the chair opposite. Hale does. "Start from the beginning," Davis says. "And don't leave out the parts that make you look bad. Those are usually the important ones." Hale lays it out, how the case landed in his queue, how the tape sounded in his ears, the visit to Monroe, the retired detective, the trip to mile 117, the note under his door, the stolen car outside his building, the parents, broken and polite and still sharp enough to know when they're being fed a story. He finishes with the fingerprint. Jonathan Marsh, Apex Protective Services, the casino connection. Davis listens without interrupting, fingers steepled under his chin. When Hale is done, the room feels heavier. "You know what this sounds like?" Davis finally says. "To anyone who doesn't have your view?" "Like I'm chasing shadows," Hale replies. "Overreacting to coincidence. Stirring up old trouble because I heard a scary tape and let it get under my skin." "Exactly," Davis says. "And I would tell you to cut it out if it weren't for one thing." He taps the print report. "This," he says, "this isn't a feeling. This is a connection that should have been made. It may not prove anything on its own, but it opens a door that someone went out of their way to shut." He leans back. "You're not the first detective to get curious about a cold case. Most of them burn out fast, get bored, or get scared. Monroe, he pushed as far as he could without ripping his own throat out. You've already got someone watching your house. That means you're either on to something or you're poking someone with a very short fuse." "I can handle the heat," Hale says. Davis shakes his head. "This isn't about whether you can handle it. It's about whether I can justify turning it up. Because once we move from curious detective to formal reopening, we're not just risking your neck. We're putting the department on a collision course with people who have money, lawyers, and memories of how things were done in the 90s. He looks at Hale for a long moment. "Do you want my advice?" he asks. "I'm not sure I do," Hale says, half honest. "I'm going to give it anyway," Davis replies. "You keep going, you document everything, every threat, every shadow car, every mysteriously flooded records room. You don't freelance, you don't confront Marsh alone, you don't go back to that casino without backup, and you sure as hell don't tell anyone upstairs more than they absolutely need to know until we understand who's listening on their end." "You're saying we can't trust our own chain of command," Hale says. "I'm saying," Davis answers, "that this case already proved 30 years ago that law enforcement partners were part of the machinery that kept certain people safe. Different names now, maybe. Same machine. I've been here long enough to know when not to feed it." He pulls a form out of his drawer, flips it around, and pushes it toward Hale. "This is a request to change status on the Carter file from cleared back to active review," he says. "Not a full reopen yet. That would trigger notification requirements we're not ready to deal with. But it gives you cover to keep digging, and it gives me a legitimate reason to tell any curious administrator that my detective isn't going rogue, he's following procedure. Hale feels a flicker of something dangerously close to gratitude. You're backing this? He asks. Davis's eyes harden. I'm backing the idea that we don't let a case call itself solved if it smells like this, he says. And I'm backing the idea that a 23-year-old who burned alive in the public imagination deserves more than a memo written to make rich men sleep better. Don't make me regret this. Hale signs the form. On his way out of the office, Davis stops him with one more thought. And Hale, he says, if someone took the time to scare you off with a stolen car and a note, that means they're nervous. People make mistakes when they're nervous. Make sure you're watching as closely as they are. The next move is obvious. He looks up Apex Protective Services. The company's headquarters sits in a low, glass-fronted building in an industrial park on the edge of town. Big logo on the door, a circulation of guards in uniform, coming and going, trading jokes and coffee. The place looks ordinary, professional, forgettable in the way companies with nothing to hide work hard to appear. Hale doesn't walk in the front door. Not yet. Instead, he parks across the street and watches. In the late afternoon, a man in a dark suit steps out of the building, flanked by two subordinates. Silver hair, straight posture, no wasted motion. He moves like someone who's spent a lifetime telling other people where to stand. The security cameras on the building's exterior seem to tilt as he passes, tracking him with quiet, robotic deference. Jonathan K. Marsh in the flesh. Hale knows him from the mugshot attached to the licensing file, an older version now, but the bone structure's the same. Marsh laughs at something one of his men says, then claps him on the shoulder in a gesture that is both friendly and proprietary. He gets into a black SUV with company plates and pulls away. Hale doesn't follow. Not this time. Instead, he snaps a photo, timestamps it, sends it to his own encrypted backup, along with a copy of the print match. Every piece goes into two places now, the official file and the shadow archive he keeps off the department network. Emily wasn't the only one who understood the value of copies. As dusk falls, he finally goes home. No stolen car waiting, no note under his door. The unease doesn't fade. He locks every lock he owns and sits at his kitchen table with the tape queued up again. He doesn't play it this time. He just stares at the little plastic rectangle, at the spool of brown ribbon inside, and thinks about how much weight a few inches of magnetic tape can carry. On the map above his desk, he draws a new line. From the casino to the security firm. From the security firm to the burned car. From the burned car to a young woman who thought facts were enough to keep her safe. Now, somewhere in the city, Jonathan Marsh is sitting in a quiet office, looking at security footage from 100 cameras that see everything except the past. And he has no idea that on a worn-out tape from 1994, his fingerprints have finally found a voice. Cold cases don't just thaw because of science. They thaw because someone decides to stop accepting the version of events that made the right people comfortable. Right now, in a small apartment lit by a single lamp, a detective with a restless conscience is doing exactly that. Out in the dark beyond his windows, engines turn over, headlights sweep across walls. Somewhere a phone rings in a room he's never seen, and a voice says, "We may have a problem." For the first time in decades, the vanishing at mile 117 isn't just a headline in the archives, it's a live wire. Night presses against the city like a hand flattening paper, smoothing out the noise until only the essential sounds remain. The hum of streetlights, the distant whir of traffic, the faint pulse of neon from the casino strip. Hale moves through it like a shadow, a man carrying too many questions in a place that pretends it stopped keeping secrets years ago. He starts the morning with the kind of ritual only detectives understand. Sitting in his car long before sunrise, hands on the steering wheel, replaying the previous day in slow motion. The fingerprint, Marsh, the note, the stolen sedan, his lieutenant's warning. They're nervous. Nervous people make mistakes. He plans to spend the day flushing out one of those mistakes. At 7:13 a.m., he walks into the precinct with 2 coffees, one for himself, one for Angela Park in the lab. He owes her for the match, and he needs more. She accepts the cup with a grateful noise and pulls up the enhanced fingerprint results again. "You're back early," she says. "Either you slept here or you've got that look people get when they're in too deep." "Both," Hale replies. Angela leans her elbows on the desk. "You're chasing an old ghost with a new face. Marsh, you think he's your guy?" "I think he's connected," Hale says. "If he touched that car, he was close enough to Emily Carter to know exactly what happened to her." Angela nods slowly. "Just be careful. Men like him, they're used to not being seen, and they don't like when that changes." He leaves the lab with more weight than clarity, but he has a direction. The first real stop is public records, employee licensing, ownership filings, business permits. He digs into Apex Protective Services, tracing its evolution from a tiny firm in the early 90s to the slick, citywide contractor it is today. Marsh didn't found it. He absorbed it, bought out the original owners, restructured, filled the board with faces tied to companies that once flowed money into and out of the casino like a circulatory system. The deeper he goes, the more he feels something widening beneath him, not a trail, an entire network. This isn't one man acting alone, this is infrastructure. At 11:52 a.m., his phone buzzes. Blocked number. He lets it ring twice before answering. Hale. For 5 seconds, he hears nothing. Then, "You are digging in the wrong ground, detective." A gruff voice, a whisper with weight behind it. Not panicked, controlled. The kind of voice that belongs to a man who's made people disappear without losing sleep. Hale stands up, heart steady but sharp. "Who is this?" Another pause, a breath. Then, "Turn left when you should turn right. You live longer that way." Click! The line dies. Haley stares at his phone, jaw tight. It would be easy to dismiss it as a prank. Except nothing about this case is easy. Nothing about the last 24 hours leaves room for jokes. He logs the call. Time, duration, transcription. Every thread is another thread that ties him to the truth. His next stop is less digital. He visits a small diner near the industrial district, not because he's hungry, but because the waitress behind the counter is the sister of one of the old casino floor managers from 1994. The man retired years ago. Now he spends every morning nursing coffee and paranoia in a corner booth. When Hale walks in, the waitress looks him over and nods toward the back. "He'll talk if you buy him pie." Hale orders 2 slices. The old man, Vince Callahan, looks up when Hale approaches, eyes narrowed behind glasses so thick they distort the world. "You're police," Callahan mutters. "I can smell it." "I'm looking into the Carter case," Hale says, sitting across from him. Callahan freezes, not dramatically, just a tightening of the shoulders, a stiffening of his knotted fingers around the coffee mug. "You don't want to do that," Callahan says quietly. "Why not?" "Because the men she pissed off aren't the kind you outlive." Hale slides the pie plate toward him. Callahan accepts it with a bitter smile. "You want the truth?" he says. "The real one? Not the version they printed when the suits held their years-late press conference?" "Yes," Hale says. "I want the truth." Callahan leans forward, voice low. "Emily was sniffing around the wrong VIP room. She overheard things she wasn't supposed to. Meetings that weren't supposed to happen. Guys from the casino, guys from Apex, before Apex was Apex. Back then, it was just Marsh and 2 other bulldogs running private arrangements. High rollers, cash drop-offs, little favors. Favors like," Hale pushes. Callahan's lips twitch. "Like getting politicians to look the other way, like moving money off the books, like fixing problems before they became headlines. You ever wonder why the casino never had big scandals in the 90s? Not because they were clean, because their problems had a cleanup crew." A chill crawls under Hale's skin. "Emily got too close," Callahan continues, lowering his voice even more. "She asked questions. She took notes. She had this idea that being right was enough to make her safe. She was wrong." "Did you know her?" Hale asks. Callahan sighs. "She came to me once, wanted to know who signed off on security protocols in the VIP suites. I told her she should walk away. She didn't listen. She was stubborn, brave, stupid." He jabs a fork into the pie. "I told the detectives that back then. Told them this wasn't some random attack. I told them Marsh's boys had been poking around asking if she'd been seen snooping. And then poof, she vanishes. Car burns. Everyone suddenly wants the case buried." "Why didn't you say all this on record?" Hale asks. Callahan meets his eyes, a haunted glint inside the old man's tired pupils. "You think I want to end up where she did?" The rest of the pie goes untouched. Hale leaves the diner with Callahan's warnings echoing in his skull. Marsh, Marsh, Marsh. The man's name pulses like a heartbeat now. Back at the precinct, Hale digs into addresses tied to Marsh. Homes, offices, P.O. boxes, properties purchased through subsidiaries. One catches his eye, a warehouse purchased in 1995 by a holding company that merged into Apex years later. Location, outskirts of the city, near the dry creek bed. He decides to drive by. Not a search, just a look. The warehouse is massive, metal siding sun-bleached and pocked with rust. The yard is mostly empty except for a security truck parked near a side door. Hale kills his engine, watches through binoculars. Nothing moves for 10 minutes. Then the side door opens. A man steps out. Not Marsh. Someone younger, broad shoulders, security uniform. He lights a cigarette, looks around, and then casually adjusts something under his jacket. A holster. Hale memorizes his face. As the man finishes his cigarette and flicks it into the dirt, Hale spots something else. A camera tucked high under the warehouse eaves. Old model. Not city grade, but connected to something. Someone is watching the warehouse. He takes out his phone and snaps photos. Then, as he's about to leave, he notices something that stops him cold. Near the back of the building, partly hidden behind a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire, sits a rusted metal drum. Black scorch marks streak its sides, burn patterns, old but familiar, and suddenly he's standing at mile 117 again, staring at a car reduced to a skeleton of warped steel. His pulse spikes. He circles the block once more, making sure he's not being tailed before heading back into traffic. But as he merges onto the highway, he notices a car behind him, a black SUV, similar to Marsh's. It keeps 2 lengths back. Never too close, never too far. He changes lanes. It changes lanes. He exits early. It exits early. A slow creeping shiver moves down his spine. When he pulls into a crowded grocery store lot, the SUV glides to the far side, parking where it can watch every aisle but pretend not to. Fine, he thinks. If they want to watch, let them. He goes inside, walks the produce section, and uses the convex mirror in the corner to scan the parking lot. The SUV door opens. A man steps out. Not Marsh. Someone stockier. Dark jacket, ball cap pulled low. The man stands there, pretending to check his phone, but his eyes are up, tracking the entrance. Hale walks casually toward the automatic doors. His heart pounds steady, controlled. He pushes his cart to the nearest cashier, pays for the single bottle of water he picked up, and steps outside. The man in the cap tenses. Hale approaches him directly. 1 step, 2. The man stiffens, ready for confrontation. Hale walks right past him, never breaks stride, never looks back. But in the reflection on the store window, he sees the man's lips move into a phone hidden by his jacket collar. Yeah, he made me. Hale keeps going. He gets in his car, drives away. The SUV doesn't follow. Not because they're done, because they know he knows. Back home, he locks the door and sits at his desk, the map in front of him lit by a single lamp. The lines he's drawn, the casino, the storage unit, mile 117, the warehouse, they are no longer random dots. They are tightening, forming a loop around one name. Jonathan K. Marsh. On the table beside him rests the microcassette. He picks it up, turns it between his fingers. Emily's voice whispers at the edge of memory. They think I'm just a girl with a notebook. He presses the tape to the map, right over Marsh's name. The phone buzzes, a text. Unknown number, just 2 words. Stop now. The message glows on the screen like a tiny silent siren. 2 words, no number to call back, no name to pin down. Just a command that assumes it will be obeyed. Stop now. Hale stares at it, thumb hovering over the screen, then takes a screenshot, saves it, forwards it to his encrypted backup. Threats leave fingerprints, even the ones made of pixels. He doesn't respond. You don't answer ghosts. You document them. He powers the phone off, then on again. Instinctive habit, as if rebooting can clear the feeling that someone has their hand wrapped around the back of his neck. It doesn't. The air in his apartment feels thinner, like the walls have leaned in to listen. He thinks about driving straight to Marsh's office, walking in, putting the print report on the table and watching the man's face. But that's what Marsh would expect. Men like him live their lives prepared for frontal assaults. They have stories ready, alibis rehearsed, expressions practiced in the mirror. No, Hale needs a side door, something Marsh isn't watching. He finds it in the worst possible place, inside his own department. Every security contract that Apex holds with city agencies has to be signed off, reviewed, filed. At some point, someone in his building put a pen to those agreements. Someone vouched for Marsh's company as a trusted partner. Hale starts there. In the records division, fluorescent lights buzz overhead as he sifts through contracts that all smell faintly of dust and bureaucracy. City Hall, courthouses, public events, Apex, Apex, Apex. The signatures rotate, different administrators, different council members, but one name keeps appearing on the recommendation line, Captain Raymond Sloan. Internal liaison, 17 years on the job, promoted during the same period Apex expanded from private gigs into public ones. Hale has seen him around, tall, calm, the kind of man who never raises his voice but somehow fills a room anyway, the kind of man who knows which strings to pull and which to leave alone. He closes the file gently, the paper's edge catching his fingertip like a paper cut. If Marsh is the arm, Sloan is a joint. He doesn't go hunting Sloan immediately. Instead, he takes Davis the text message, the photos of the SUV, the record of the anonymous call. His lieutenant reads everything in silence. When he finishes, he rubs the bridge of his nose like he's fighting a headache. They're not subtle, Davis mutters. They don't have to be, Hale says. Subtleties for people who aren't used to owning half the town. Davis looks at the printouts again. You sure you want to keep pushing? He asks. This is the part where most detectives have their maybe I'll let this one go epiphany. Hale thinks about Emily's parents sitting in that too-quiet kitchen with 20 years of unspent grief piled up in the corners. He thinks about Monroe, hunched in his armchair, dirt still under his nails from all the graves he's dug and been told to ignore. No, Hale says, I'm fresh out of epiphanies. Davis exhales. All right, he says. Then we stop pretending this is just an interesting side project. We treat it like what it is, a case where someone is actively trying to keep us from asking the right questions. He pulls open a drawer, takes out a slim, locked file and sets it on the desk. "This is my insurance," he says. "Things that don't go into the normal system, cases where I'm not sure who else is listening. You're not the first detective I've had to run off grid, but you might be the one with the biggest target painted on him." Hale studies the file. "What are you suggesting?" he asks. "I'm suggesting," Davis says, "that from this point on, you assume every email, every phone call, every official memo can land on the wrong desk. You use face-to-face when possible. You leave less of a trail they control and more of a trail we control, and we keep what matters here, not just on a server that someone with a badge and a phone call can accidentally purge." Hale nods slowly. "Understood. And one more thing," Davis adds. "You don't go at Marsh alone. You want to rattle his cage, we do it with a legitimate pretext and another pair of eyes in the room. If he's half as connected as you think, he's been preparing for this visit since '94. They set it up that afternoon under the thinnest possible pretense, a routine follow-up on security protocols related to an entirely unrelated investigation. Nothing in the request mentions Emily, nothing mentions 1994. Hale drafts the email, Davis sends it from his account. It's amazing how a lieutenant's signature can turn a landmine into a meeting. They get a yes inside an hour. Apex headquarters again, but this time Hale doesn't watch from across the street. He walks through the front doors with Davis at his side, badges visible, expressions neutral. The receptionist is all professional smiles. "Gentlemen, welcome to Apex Protective. Mr. Marsh will be with you shortly. Can I get you anything? Water, coffee?" "Just Marsh," Davis says. They're led into a conference room with too much glass and not enough warmth. The walls are lined with framed certificates and photos. Marsh shaking hands with city officials. Marsh at ribbon cuttings. Marsh receiving plaques that use words like partnership and excellence and commitment to safety. Hale studies every face in those photos as if one of them might step out of the frame and confess. The door opens. Jonathan Marsh walks in. Up close, he looks exactly like the man who stepped out of the SUV. Silver hair, tailored suit, the kind of fitness that comes from private trainers, not manual labor. His smile is wide, practiced, and almost convincing. "Lieutenant Davis," Marsh says, extending a hand, "and you must be Detective Hale. I appreciate you coming by. Our relationship with law enforcement is something I'm very proud of." His grip is firm, too firm, a quiet test. "We're glad to hear that," Davis says smoothly. "We'll try not to take up too much of your time." They sit. Marsh folds his hands on the table. "So," Marsh says, "how can Apex assist today?" Hale lets Davis start. They talk about event security, choke points, camera coverage, all legitimate questions tied to a recent disturbance downtown. Marsh answers easily, confidently, a man in his element. He knows procedures, knows the lingo, knows how to sound cooperative while giving away nothing he doesn't want to. Only after 15 minutes of safe conversation does Hale slide a single item out of his folder and place it on the table, a photocopy of the fingerprint match report. Marsh's eyes flick down, then up. "What's this?" he asks. "A fingerprint hit," Hale says, "from an old case, one that crossed paths with a vehicle registered to a former casino employee in 1994. He watches Marsh carefully. The man's expression doesn't change, not dramatically, just a tiny tightening around the mouth, a brief, almost imperceptible flaring of the nostrils. "I'm not sure I follow," Marsh says. "The print," Hale continues, voice steady, "was recovered from the underside of a car door handle, belonging to a woman who went missing and was later presumed murdered. The match came back to you, from your licensing file." Silence settles over the room like a dropped curtain. Marsh leans back. "I see," he says softly. "So this isn't about crowd control?" "It's about both," Davis says, before Marsh can try to frame it as an ambush. "We're reviewing some very old evidence with new tools. Your name came up. We thought it best to ask you about it directly." Marsh steeples his fingers. "Let me be clear," he says. "In 1994, I did occasional consulting work for various establishments, including, yes, the casino in question. I've shaken thousands of hands, opened hundreds of doors. If my fingerprints turned up on a car belonging to someone who worked there, that doesn't surprise me. We used valet services, shared lots. It's hardly a smoking gun, Detective." Hale expected that. "What about the night her car burned?" Hale asks. "You remember where you were?" Marsh smiles slightly. "I barely remember where I was last Tuesday," he says. "But I imagine your predecessors at the time asked me the same thing. And I imagine I told them what I'll tell you now. I was not involved in that young woman's unfortunate disappearance. Any suggestion otherwise would be defamatory." The room cools another few degrees. "We're not suggesting anything," Davis says carefully. "We're asking." Marsh's eyes sharpen. "I've built my business on cooperation with this department," he says. "On trust, on mutual respect. It would be a shame to see that shaken by a misunderstanding about a 30-year-old tragedy that, as I recall, was eventually resolved." "Resolved," Hale repeats. "That's one word for it." Marsh turns his gaze fully on Hale. "You're young enough to still believe every mystery must have a pure, satisfying answer," he says. "Let me offer you some advice, Detective. In my line of work, and yours, we learn that closure is often the best we can hope for. Not perfection. Closure. The family needed peace, the city needed assurance, the department needed to move forward. Sometimes that's the closest we get to justice. It's almost word for word what the press release said years ago. Hale feels his jaw clench. "Did you know Emily?" he asks, using her name deliberately. Marsh's lips curve in a practiced expression of sorrow. "I knew of her," he says. "Ambitious, stubborn, from what I've heard. The kind of young reporter who likes to believe she's bulletproof. It's always tragic when someone like that gets in over their head." The phrasing lands like a confession disguised as commentary. "Gets in over their head," Hale repeats, "by asking the wrong questions or by trusting the wrong people?" Marsh's smile thins. "Careful, detective," he says quietly. "You don't want to start sounding like a conspiracy podcast." Davis clears his throat. "We appreciate your time, Mr. Marsh," he says, closing the folder. "If we need anything further, we'll contact your office." Marsh stands. "You're welcome to," he says, "though I suspect you have better things to do than chase echoes. The city doesn't police itself." They leave amid handshakes and hollow courtesies. But as the glass doors slide closed behind them, Hale hears a faint murmur inside the building, someone speaking into a phone, urgent, low. The hair on his arms rises. In the car, Davis exhales hard. "Well," he says, "he's either innocent and offended or guilty and very well practiced." "He knew exactly what case I was talking about before I said her name," Hale says. "You saw it." "Yeah," Davis replies. "He knew." They sit in the parking lot for a moment, letting the air cool. "You pushed just enough," Davis says. "No more fishing expeditions without something new to bait the hook. We rattled him. Now we watch to see what falls." Back at the precinct, an email waits in Hale's inbox. Internal, marked confidential. From Captain Raymond Sloan. Subject, Carter case activities. Detective Hale, please see me at your earliest convenience regarding your renewed involvement in the Carter matter. There are historical and political considerations I believe you may not be fully aware of. It is important that we align our approach. Respectfully, Captain R. Sloan. The words are polite. The tone is not. It reads like a velvet glove pulled over a closed fist. Hale forwards the email to Davis without comment, then walks down the hall towards Sloan's office. The door is open. Inside, Sloan stands behind his desk, sleeves rolled, tie loosened, posture relaxed in the way of someone who knows they own the room by default. He looks up and smiles. "Detective Hale," he says. "Come in. Close the door, please." Hale does. Sloan gestures to a chair. "I've been hearing your name more than usual," he says, leaning back. "And the name Carter along with it. You've stirred some old dust." "Is that a problem?" Hale asks. Sloan studies him. "Depends," he says, "on whether you're trying to solve something or make a point." "I thought those were the same thing," Hale replies. Sloan chuckles softly. "Spoken like a man who hasn't yet learned the difference between truth and utility," he says. "Look, off the record, no camera, no recorder. I'll tell you something. That case was handled in a, let's say, imperfect environment. The 90s were messy, lines were blurrier, some relationships between law enforcement and private entities were closer than they should have been. No one is denying that." "I've noticed," Hale says. "But," Sloan continues, holding up a hand, "after years of work, a narrative was constructed that allowed this department, that family, and this city to move forward." You may not like the word narrative, but that's what justice often looks like in practice. We present something that fits most of the facts and harms the fewest people. It's not clean. It's not pure, but it keeps the machine running. Hale feels something cold settle in his chest. "And what about the facts that didn't fit?" he asks. "The ones that pointed at people who still hold contracts with this department?" Sloan's eyes sharpen. "Be very careful where you aim that implication, detective," he says. "You're suggesting corruption at the institutional level. That's not a stone you throw lightly." "I'm suggesting," Hale says evenly, "that a security contractor with a fingerprint on a victim's car should have been looked at harder, and that the people who championed that contractor might not be the best judges of whether the case is truly over." Sloan stands slowly, walks around the desk, and perches on its edge, closer now. "You have talent," he says. "Instincts. You're the kind of detective this place needs. But if you believe you can drag every old ghost into the light without consequences, you will not last. People with long memories and deep pockets do not like renegotiating history." "Is that a warning?" Hale asks. "It's advice," Sloan replies, "from someone who has watched good cops get chewed up chasing purity. You want to help people? Focus on the cases that aren't 3 decades cold. Focus on the bodies we can still find, the witnesses we can still flip. Don't let one dead girl take your whole career with her." The words hang there, ugly and bare. Hale stands. "With respect, Captain," he says, "she's not dead in our system. She's a cleared homicide without a body, and a suspect we can't cross-examine. And I'm not sure I'm comfortable hanging my badge on that." Sloan's jaw tightens. "You're not here to be comfortable," he says. "You're here to be effective. Think about that, hard, before you decide that this hill is the one you want to die on." Hale walks out of the office with his pulse thudding in his ears. In the hallway, the fluorescent lights buzz. Phones ring. The building moves around him, unaware that somewhere between the first floor and the fourth, a line has been drawn. On one side, neat narratives, utility, closure. On the other, a burned car on a desert road, a tape that ends mid-sentence, a woman's voice saying, "They think I'm just a girl with a notebook." As he reaches his desk, his phone vibrates again. Another blocked call. He answers. "Hale," a familiar voice this time. "Monroe." "You kicked the hornet's nest, kid," the retired detective rasps. "I just had an old friend send me a message from some very nervous people. They're asking why my name's popping back up in internal search logs." "And what did you tell them?" Hale asks. "I told them old age makes me nostalgic," Monroe says. "Listen, if they're circling you this fast, it means you're close to something they can't afford to have opened. Don't let them scare you into dropping it. But don't think for a second they won't try." Hale looks at the map on his wall, the lines tightening around Marsh's name, around Apex, around the casino, around the desert road where the fire once burned. "I'm past the point of dropping it," he says. "Yeah," Monroe replies. "I figured. Just remember, some fires don't die when the fuel runs out. They keep burning in people, in the quiet, in the dark. You're carrying one now. Make sure it doesn't carry you." The line clicks off. Hale sets the phone down. Outside, the sun slides behind a bank of clouds, casting the city in a flat gray light that makes everything look slightly unreal, like a set, like a stage. Somewhere beyond the glass, a man in a tailored suit steps into a room full of monitors, watches a feed from a camera that looks down on the police precinct lot, and smiles a small, careful smile. Upstairs, in a quiet office close to the hallway, Captain Sloan picks up his own phone and dials a number that never appears on any official contact list. "It's me," he says. "We have a situation. One of our detectives is starting to believe in ghosts again." In a storage room, in a box that should have been forgotten, a microcassette sits between paper files and a folded note that reads, "Some stories burn people." And in the middle of it all, Ryan Hale leans over his desk, pen in hand, beginning a new page in a case file that was supposed to have ended years ago, scratching out the first words that will eventually reshape a headline. Nevada 1994 cold case solved. But the story was never over. By the time the sun goes down, the file on Hale's desk has stopped being paper and started being gravity. Every page he adds pulls him deeper. Every note he scribbles drags the center of the story a little further away from unsolved tragedy and closer to engineered disappearance. The precinct thins out after dark. Phones ring less. Chairs scrape less. The building exhales. Hale stays. The fluorescent light over his desk hums like an insect trapped in plastic. He studies the map again, the lines he's drawn between places and names, the way everything seems to orbit the same invisible center. The casino, Apex, Sloan, Marsh, Emily. He keeps coming back to the tape. The last seconds, the cut-off sentence, the turn signal's frantic clicking, the way her voice shifted from fearless to afraid in a breath, it feels less like a recording and more like a live wire that someone sliced mid-spark. He pulls the transcript closer, running his finger down the lines, looking for anything he missed. A phrase, a hint, a name she almost said. Halfway down the page, a margin note catches his eye. He's seen it before, skimmed it, ignored it. This time it lands. In faded blue ink, just beside Emily's line about having copies off-site, someone has written, "Ask it about backup rumor." The handwriting is unfamiliar, not Monroe's, not any of the early detectives he's met or reviewed. Another ghost in the file, a backup rumor. He goes to records again, this time not for paper, for people. The IT office sits in a corner of the building that looks exactly like every IT office everywhere. Mismatched chairs, empty coffee cups, monitors sprouting like mushrooms from every available surface. A young tech with headphones around his neck looks up as Hale walks in. "You hear about your password again?" the kid asks. "Because it's definitely 8 characters and not password this time, right?" Hale flashes his badge. "I'm here about ghosts," he says. "The digital kind." The kid, badge reads, Turner, grins. "Now you're speaking my language." Hale lays it out as simply as he can. Old case, old tape, old rumors. 20-something years ago, he says, someone wrote, "Ask it about backup rumor" in this file. I know that's a long shot. I know hard drives from that era are probably recycled into toasters by now. But if there was any practice back then of mirroring audio evidence, off-site backups, whatever. Turner leans back and whistles. "Dude," he says. "You're asking about prehistoric times. We're talking dial-up tapes, drives the size of microwaves. I was in kindergarten." "Records show you've got legacy archives," Hale says. "Stuff that got imaged when you upgraded systems." Turner's grin fades a little. "Yeah," he says. "We do. For some things. Not everything. Depends on whether anybody thought it was worth the time. What's the case number?" Hale gives it to him. Turner swivels to his main screen, fingers flying over the keyboard. Lines of directories flicker by. Old systems, mirrored once and left to fossilize. Okay, Turner murmurs. We've got a snapshot of the evidence index from, wow, that's old, late 90s, audio logs, chain of custody entries, blah blah. Wait. He leans closer. Here, there's an entry for your case number, 2 audio files listed. One matches the microcassette in your file room. The other is flagged as secondary copy with a location that doesn't exist anymore. Old server, decommissioned. Hale's pulse ticks up. Does the secondary still exist, he asks. Turner chews his lip. If it was imaged during the upgrade, maybe, he says. Depends on whether anyone cared enough to migrate it. If not, it's gone, but... He clicks a few more times. Hold up, somebody must have liked this case. There's a note here. Mirror to external media before wipe. No confirmation it ever happened. Just the instruction. External media. Like a backup tape? Hale asks. Turner nods. Yeah. Or a disc. Or something. We had a weird hybrid system back then. Half digital, half analog, all a mess. The kind of thing we shove into the deepest corner of the archive and pray never breaks. Hale straightens. Where? He asks. Turner sighs like a man about to volunteer for overtime. Basement, he says. Old hardware storage. We call it the boneyard. I'll show you, but if we get eaten by feral filing cabinets, I'm blaming you. The boneyard feels like stepping into a different decade. Racks of obsolete drives, towers of dusty servers, boxes labeled with acronyms no one uses anymore. The air is stale, tinged with the metallic scent of aging electronics. Turner pulls on gloves and starts opening cabinets. These are the imaging tapes, he says, riffling through rows of plastic cases. System snapshots. Most of them are junk now, but if your case got mirrored, here. He slides out a tape the size of a paperback, yellowing label barely legible. Case batch, 93, 96, Turner reads. Evidence index subset, audio mirror. If your phantom backup exists, it's on here. Hale watches as Turner hooks up an ancient reader, coaxing a whine of protest from the machine as it wakes. The tape slots in with a clunk. This might take a minute, Turner says, or a year, or it might just die dramatically. These things are older than I am. The screen fills with code. Directories unfold. Turner mutters under his breath, navigating arcane file structures like a medium at a seance. Okay. Evidence, audio, year. Here we go. He squints. Case number. Bingo. 2 entries. One's labeled primary, MC01, which lines up with your microcassette. The other, he looks up, eyes suddenly bright, is labeled supplemental car audio. Car audio. Hale's heart rate spikes. What does that mean, he asks, though he already knows. Turner grins. Either someone ripped some tunes from her stereo, he says, or the vehicle had a built-in recorder of some kind. Could be a test. Could be the mic from the tape picking up more than they realized. But whatever it is, the system definitely mirrored it. You want me to pull it? Now, Hale says. Turner nods, copies the file off the emulated tape onto a modern drive, then into a format the current system can read. The whole time, Hale feels like he's watching surgery on a critically injured piece of time. When Turner finally hits play, the speakers crackle. At first, it's nothing but engine noise, wind, the same ambient soundscape as the tape he's already memorized. But then, under it, fainter, he hears something else, a second voice, male, distant but clear enough. You're sure she's alone? Hale freezes. Turner's eyes widen. Whoa, he whispers. The recording isn't framed like the tape. No intro, no explanation, just a window into a moment. The sound dips, like the source mic wasn't in the cabin but catching audio from outside, maybe relayed from a radio or a call recorded at dispatch. It doesn't matter. The content is what matters. Hale gestures for Turner to rewind, then pulls out his phone and starts recording the playback, a second backup of the first backup. He listens, every nerve tight. You're sure she's alone? Another male voice, rougher, answers. She left the lot solo. We saw her on camera. If she picked someone up, we'd have caught it at the gate. Then why is she still talking? Static fuzzes the next words, but enough survives. Said she was heading out to meet... Recorder. Insurance. The voices fade, replaced by a burst of noise, engine roar, gravel crunching, something like a door slam. Then a new sound overlays it all. A faint, rhythmic clicking, the turn signal. It's the same stretch of time from a different angle, the same night, the same drive, but this time from somewhere just outside her car. A radio channel, a second channel of the story. Cut her off before the turn, the first voice says. Make it look like she lost it. We don't need a scene in the lot. Copy that. The hair on Hale's arms rises. His stomach flips with a slow, cold realization. Someone was listening. Someone was directing. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. It wasn't panic. It was choreography. The audio drops into noise again. Then faintly, there's one last exchange. We good? As long as the evidence burns with her. Click. Silence. Turner leans back, eyes wide. Jesus, he says. This was just sitting here? No one listened to this? Someone listened, Hale says, voice low. They just decided it wasn't part of the story. His mind races. The recording doesn't name names. It doesn't say Marsh or Sloan or Apex. It doesn't say Casino. But it proves coordination. It proves multiple actors. It proves they thought about optics. Make it look like she lost it. They cared how it looked. They cared about the scene. He has to move carefully. This doesn't leave here yet, he tells Turner. Not on email. Not on shared drives. You keep a copy in whatever dark hole you have for things that break your brain. I'll log it with Davis. That's it. No one else. Turner nods slowly. Understood, he says. But detective, you're not just poking the hornet's nest anymore. You're kicking it off the tree. Yeah, Hale says. I know. He walks out of the boneyard with the audio echoing in his head. Cut her off before the turn. We don't need a scene in the lot. As long as the evidence burns with her. The evidence did not burn with her. The key survived, the storage unit survived, the tape survived, and now, hidden in an obsolete format in a forgotten corner of a basement, a second recording has survived, long enough to crawl into the present and drag the past screaming with it. He takes it straight to Davis. They sit in the lieutenant's office, door closed, blinds half drawn like conspirators instead of cops. Hale plays the car audio. No commentary, no framing, just the raw sound. When it's over, Davis stares at his desk for a long moment. Say out loud what you think this is, he says quietly. It's evidence, Hale says, of coordination, multiple actors, intent. They were following her, watching her leave, talking about how to stage the crash. They refer to her recorder as insurance. They knew what she had, or thought they did. They thought if she and the car burned, the story would die there too. And it didn't, Davis says. Because she made copies, because someone at some point ordered this backup, because Turner was bored enough or loyal enough to go digging. He leans back, eyes on the ceiling. You realize what this means, he says. Anyone who signed off on calling this case solved, anyone who had access to this audio, either never listened or chose to ignore it. For the sake of closure. It also means, Hale says, that whoever orchestrated her death had inside access. They knew when she left. They knew where she was going. They were in a position to intercept. Davis looks at him. You're thinking Marsh, he says. I'm thinking Marsh, Hale says. I'm thinking security channels. I'm thinking radios and cameras and private contractors who get to stand in the blind spots. I'm also thinking Sloan. Someone upstairs had to hear this. Someone had to decide it wasn't worth complicating the narrative with. Davis rubs his face. So what's the play, he asks. We get it transcribed, timestamped, and logged, Hale says. We link it to the existing evidence. We update the status change request. We make it impossible for anyone to pretend this doesn't exist without committing outright fraud. And we consider that we may not be the only ones who know it's here. Davis frowns. You think someone else remembered the backup? He asks. I think the people who wrote Ask It About Backup Rumor didn't just forget, Hale says. Maybe they got shut down. Maybe they got moved. Maybe they got scared. But the note is proof that this ghost has rattled its chains before. Davis nods slowly. I'll lock this in my drawer, he says, patting the file. Hard copy. No digital tag that pops up on some administrator's dashboard. Turner keeps his ghost copy in the boneyard. You keep yours wherever you're hiding your sins. If they come looking, they shouldn't find everything in one place. Hale leaves the office with a strange mix of dread and clarity. He has something real now. Not just instinct. Not just old men's memories and parents' grief. A voice from the night itself, stripped of names but laced with intent, and intent is the foundation of murder. The next step is obvious and dangerous. He drives to Emily's parents' house. The sun is low, skies streaked in oranges and purples that feel too pretty for the weight he's carrying. When her mother opens the door, Hale sees the question in her eyes before she speaks. Did you? She begins, then stops, hand over her mouth. No, he says softly. Not that. Not yet. But I found something. I thought you should hear it from me before you hear it from a press release that makes it sound smaller than it is. They sit at the same kitchen table, the same photos on the walls, the same quiet hum of a house that's forgotten what laughter sounds like. He plays the car audio. Emily's mother presses her fingers to her temples. Her father stares at a crack in the table's varnish, jaw clenched. When the recording ends, the house is so silent Hale can hear the fridge cycling on. They were following her, her father says, voice flat. Yes, Hale says. They were talking about her like a job, her mother whispers. Like moving a box or fixing a leak, Hale nods. I can't tell you it's enough to put cuffs on anyone yet, he says. There are no names in the audio, no direct identifiers, but it proves what you always believed, that this was not random, not a panicked act, not some dead man with a gambling problem acting alone. It was planned, it was coordinated. Will they finally admit that? Her father asks. Not willingly, Hale says, but they'll be forced to acknowledge this piece, at least internally. That's where it starts. Her mother looks up at him, eyes red. Every time you come here, she says, you tear us open again, and every time I am grateful and furious and tired. I want this to end. I also want it to never end until someone says out loud what was done to her, and by who. I know, Hale says. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, her father says. Just don't stop until someone makes you. On the drive back, the city blurs past in streaks of light. Hale feels the edges of the story sharpening around him. The tape, the car audio, Marsh, Sloan, the warehouse with the burn-scarred drum, the note under his door, the SUV in the lot, they're all pointed in the same direction now. And somewhere in an office lit by expensive lamps and insulated from the sounds of the street, a man with silver hair and steady hands picks up a phone and hears a voice say, "They found something. Old audio, the kind that shouldn't still exist." For the first time in a long time, Jonathan Marsh feels something unfamiliar. Not control, not confidence, fear. In the dark of Hale's apartment later that night, the detective pins a new printout to his wall. A rough transcription of the car audio. Underneath it, in his own handwriting, he writes a question that has haunted the case from the start. What if the cold case was solved the moment her car burned, and we were just never told the truth about who struck the match?